Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How are you doing? Why don't you move up a little bit to the front, be near us here, because we're going to have a crowded house very, very soon, so I don't want people falling over you. Yeah, and you really want to hear all of the work that this presentation particularly is doing. I mean, this is part of the fundraising roadshow. Of course, we're going to be profiling some of the great work with Oxford Science Enterprises, their portfolio. And if you don't know who they are, you really, really need to check these out. You know, we might occasionally hear a bit of negative news about the UK, about the economy, about what's happening there. But the one place, the one sweet spot at the minute, the shining star in the UK, without a doubt, I can promise you, is Oxford Science Enterprises. The portfolio they have, the companies they have, all of the investment, everything that's going on there, it really, really is, it's quite phenomenal, and I think it's starting a movement with great momentum. So again, just very quickly, a few housekeeping rules, and mainly to our dear colleagues here. We don't have a lot of time, and we have to be out dead on time. Hassan, where are you? Hassan has a big board that's very clear. Come up here and let our friends see it. Now, if you see that, that means you have no more words, not one. You can just about wave and leave the stage, okay? That's not the time to be saying, and now I want to conclude, okay? You've done it. You're finished with that. So we are a bit sort of, that means I'll get off the stage very quickly. I'm going to be quiet now. But we have a lot to get through, really, really, really interesting people here. But one person I do want you to meet now, and we'll probably do a little duet on stage once we get started, is the CEO of Oxford Science Enterprises. Give a big, big warm welcome to Ed Bussey.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Great. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's even an even bigger pleasure to be able to introduce 5 of our really incredible portfolio companies. Before we move into the speed pitching phase, I just wanted to say a few words about OSE, where we come from and who we are. We are a venture builder. We were set up 10 years ago. We look for the most advanced science and technology emerging from Oxford University Labs, and we look specifically for science that has the potential to become a billion-pound business and that can solve a major global problem. We're building companies across therapeutics, fusion, AI, quantum, health tech, robotics, space. If you think about pretty much every single major problem facing humanity, we will have at least one company in our pipeline. We have a special university relationship. They are a shareholder in us, but we're otherwise independent. We have 60 people on the ground, walking the corridors, in the labs, engaging with the academics, 70 Nobel Prize winners. It is the most incredible ecosystem. We're building businesses on the shoulders of the world's #1 research university. A few numbers to bring this alive. We are today the largest single university builder of spin-outs. We've invested £3 billion alongside 300 co-investors into the Oxford ecosystem, and we're very close to building 1 new company a month. After 10 years of zigzags, of trial and error, we've now cracked the code of how you build high-value companies on a repeatable basis. We have 120 companies now in total, and I'm really proud to say that a few weeks ago, we had our first unicorn exit, a company called Oxford Ionics. But I'm even more excited by the fact that I have at least 50 more of these coming through our pipeline. So watch this space. We think over the next 3 to 5 years, so by 2030, OSE's value will go up by about £3 billion as that first wave of exits starts to flow through. So with no further ado, I think, Edna, we're going to move into the...
We're going to do our little duet on stage.
Yep.
See, I told you this was something very special. And I was just casually talking to somebody about what I was doing here, and they actually said to me, you've got to check out Ed, and you've got to check out the whole Oxford Science Enterprises. So there you go. The word is out. They're talking about you. Now tell us a little bit about Salience Labs, because this is our first call up here.
Well, I'm not going to say too much, but Vaish was one of our very early entrepreneurs in residence. We have a fantastic entrepreneur in residence program and is building an incredible company in the photonics chips space.
Okay, so we're going to let him...
I think we're going to let Vaish, we'll do the talking on this.
Okay, so a big warm welcome for the CEO of Salience Labs, and you introduce him. Welcome.
Vaish?
Vaish, okay, Vaish Kewadi, yeah? Kawada. Vaish, thank you so much. We're looking forward.
Ed, I might steal the clicker from you, though. Thanks. Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vaish Kawada. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Salience Labs. We're a team whose mission is to improve the performance of AI models, and we're doing this by enabling all optical networking in the AI data center. As you all know, CapEx spend for AI data centers is continuing to explode. Some of us expected a bit of a slowdown earlier this year, but that's not been the case. In fact, growth has continued to accelerate. We'll exceed over 400 billion this year. Inference will soon surpass training workloads. And we're all excited for the algorithmic improvements, such as DeepSeek, but we're experiencing Jevons paradox. So improvements on AI models are only driving a total increase in demand. But there is a problem, and that is that one of data movement. In order to run AI models, we have to move excessive amounts of data in the data center. And this has an impact on the utilization of that very expensive CapEx. Depending on the model, up to 60% of your model runtime is taken up by the network. And within an AI hardware system, 40% of your heavy chips are your switch chips, so the chips that direct your data to where it needs to go. Specifically, one of the problems is that there are no optical switches for AI. As network rates increase, more and more data in the data center is moved using fiber optic cables. However, without an optical switch, one has to transform data into the electronic domain to direct it to the right place, which is expensive and slow. And so our vision is to enable an all-optical network, which would be faster, enable high data bandwidths, reduce your power consumption, but most importantly, increase your model runtime. And this is what we've developed at Salience Labs. We're proud to announce our world first, which is our optical switch chip, designed specifically for AI scale-up. It's a fully integrated on-chip solution, so we take data in, direct it to the right place, whilst keeping it fully optical. And we've designed it in conjunction with our key customers, who are GPU manufacturers and data center operators, to be compatible to existing racks. As mentioned at the top of my talk, it is indeed a very large market that we're going after. Our first application was actually in trading infrastructure. So our switch is very low latency. We had a number of financial institutions who are interested in deploying it for their trading infrastructure. But the core market that we're going after is the AI backend network. So this is the network that connects GPU racks together, and we have provided latency improvement that improves your model runtime. We're seeing a lot of development and increased deployments of optics in the data centers, specifically with AI. Some of you may have heard of developments around co-packaged optics transceivers, or CPO, which is aiming to push optics into the rack. And when that happens, there will also be a need for an optical switch in the rack as well. We've been working closely with customers across these spaces, both those developing CPO, as well as those designing GPU racks, to ensure that our optical switch is compatible to existing solutions. And this is a little bit more about that first market and our first target market that we are addressing. It is the rack-to-rack switching. So we enable the scale-up domain for AI to go between racks, enabling a fully optical connected rack-to-rack system. This reduces the overall power of the networking infrastructure. We're replacing out not just electrical switches, but the transceivers doing conversions, therefore reducing the power of that layer by up to 8x. We reduce CapEx by removing 2 layers of transceivers, and we provide very low latency connectivity, which is critical when you're inferencing models, when you're wanting to run your AI agents in order to get a fast response time. And most importantly, and something that customers have loved, is that we're compatible to be very low loss and compatible to existing hardware. Salience Labs was founded from many years of research from Oxford University and Munster University in Germany. In fact, we pulled in over 10 years worth of research into the company, but we've paired that with a very deep bench of expertise from the semiconductor industry. So our team is coming on to now 50 people, but we're a lean and mean team. Our leadership team includes experience from individuals who've led the development of the switch business within Broadcom, successfully navigated IPOs, successfully exited silicon photonics companies, as well as built out the supply chain for tier 1 semiconductor companies. Our headquarters and lab are in Oxford in the UK, and we have a second office in California. One thing that's pretty important about the product lines that we've developed is that we've designed our product to be volume manufacturable. And this is part of its appeal. Our optical switch chip is wafer manufacturable. We've done this by having a close foundry partnership, and we've had our full supply chain signed off by our key customers. And the second is that photonics really is a greenfield space. It's exciting to work in. We have multiple products that we have under development protected by our patent portfolio. And so that's a quick introduction to Salience Labs. We're excited for the future of AI. We're excited for the future of AI data centers. So if you have any questions, please do come up and chat to me after. Thanks.
Veer, thanks so much. Yeah, I told you they were impressive, and none better than to start with you. I love it. You know, our headquarters is in Oxford, and we have an office in California, as you do. Well done, it's like, but really, really exciting, and I think we see here all the affiliations and all the people you've done, the work you've done, incredible. It's fabulous.
Yeah,
well done.
Honestly, I think this job is a privilege. We have this incredible array of science, and we're building these incredible companies. And I truly believe if the UK is going to build its first trillion-pound company, it will come out of the deep tech ecosystem like Oxford. So,
and you heard it here at FII 9 first.
You heard it here first, and you might even see the company here too.
Tell us a little bit about Odqa.
Right, next up in renewable energy, we have Chris, who is going to speak about Odqa. Chris?
Don't give it too much away, that's great. Chris Kemet, here he is, the CEO of Odqa. Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So at Odqa, our mission is simple but bold, creating industrial heat from sunlight. Why? Because for every 1 in every 5 tons of carbon emitted globally, they come from industrial heat. Industrial heat is probably the great climate challenge that you've never really thought about. And for us, we have a really clear solution. So what it is that we do, step 1, we use a large field of mirrors to collect and concentrate sunlight to a very, very, very fine point. 2, we use our proprietary technology to take that concentrated beam of light and turn it into superheated air that's greater than 800 degrees centigrade. We blast that air into a thermal energy store, and that means that we can provide hot air, whether it's cloudy, whether it's nighttime. We have a true 24/7 operation. And the 24/7 operation is to feed into industrial processes. In effect, we're creating a synthetic flame. We're directly replacing burning gas or burning diesel in industrial processes. And we're able to do that in a totally clean way. This is a very simple but elegant solution that's been dreamed up by engineers in Oxford. We've managed to attract great engineering talent from across aerospace and from across Formula One, and we're spun out of the Oxford Thermofluids Institute. So applying a lot of jet engine science to this problem of how do we decarbonize industrial heat. And this isn't just pretty slides. We've done this in real life at scale. In Oxford, we have a solar laboratory. We've got some very big lights that allow us to rapidly iterate the technology and prototype it so that we can build the best solution for customers. And in Spain, we have a demonstration site. This is a world-first plant that is taking sunlight, bringing it into our receiver, into the thermal energy store, and providing 24/7 heat for industrial processes. We've brought real customer materials to site, and we've dried and processed them to their exacting specifications. So a real world first and a huge leap in the world of concentrated solar power. And our clients are interested in us for 3 reasons. The first is cost, or cost leadership. Fossil fuel pricing is very volatile. If you're looking to decarbonize, you can electrify, but at very, very high cost. Our costs in the long run will be much lower than electrification, and also much in parity with fossil fuels. The second is decarbonization. There aren't a lot of options to decarbonize heavy industry and industrial processes. And the third is energy security. So reducing dependence on imported fossil fuels and reducing dependence on creating large grid connections where you're competing with solar, with wind, and now ever more with data centers as well. And our total addressable market is huge. If we look at industrial heat at temperatures 400 degrees and above, that accounts for roughly half of the heat that we use on planet Earth. So if we think of ceramics production, chemical industry, aluminium or building materials, imagine in future where we're melting aluminium from concentrated sunlight, or we're processing mining materials from sunlight, rather than burning gas in a forge, or rather than burning very costly, very expensive, imported heavy fuel oil. Our technology can produce this synthetic flame and integrate with downstream equipment very, very easily, and therefore we have a huge potential market. 300 billion today, rising to 500 billion by 2030. And the alternatives don't have the same edge that we do. From a perspective of heat pumps, they can't reach the same temperatures. If we look at direct electrification, you can reach very high temperatures, but at a very high cost. There's potential issues around cost with hydrogen and also safety. For us, we have sunlight and air as our ingredients. It's very safe. We will build it to very low cost. There are no grid constraints. It's a truly off-grid solution to create 800-degree heat, replacing fossil fuel flames. Our view is that decarbonization will, at best, be very slow, and at worst be stopped in its tracks if we have very, very expensive alternative fuels. So we're coming down the cost curve. We already know that we will be much, much more cost competitive than direct electrification. We have a path to reaching cost parity with fossil fuels and an ambition to get even lower than that, to really drive adoption of this technology. So why we're here this week is 2 reasons. One, we want to talk to customers. Saudi is an incredibly solar-rich region, and we're looking to exploit that to generate very, very high temperature heat and to really feed into the Vision 2030 of decarbonizing industry across Saudi Arabia. We're also looking for investment. Together with OSE, we'll be running a Series A in the coming months. And from our perspective, we're really hoping this is going to be a true British export story, and also a true Saudi success story of creating whole new industries off the back of this enabling technology. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to speak to you more about creating industrial heat from sunlight.
Chris, thank you so much. You're in the right part of the world. Hopefully we might have time for a few questions with all of you afterwards. But I'm actually heading to Abu Dhabi next week for one of the biggest energy shows in the world. I should bring you with me. You should just move here for a few months and do the rounds, because from now until February, I think it's just energy show, power show, mining show here in January. You need to get your schedule on back. But that is absolutely incredible. And I think the type of technology, particularly the Saudis and our friends with PIF and places, they're looking at investing. So hopefully they'll be knocking on your door. Okay, we're going to be looking at quantum computing. This is definitely more your sort of expertise than mine.
Okay. Well, I've learned not to be an expert. We're building incredible companies, but also in very, very specialist sectors. So I've learned to stay well within my swim lane. But we have some quantum thought leaders here. First up is James from Quantum Motion. We've had an amazing exit with Oxford Ionics a few weeks ago, one of our other quantum companies. Oxford is really leading the world in terms of its quantum technology. And James, we are all waving the flag for you as well, as one of our next most exciting quantum companies. James.
So welcome the CEO of Quantum Motion, Dr. James Pallas-Dimmock. Great, James. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. And yeah, thank you very much for having me here this afternoon. I won't try to go through in detail what quantum computing is. Suffice to say, it's the most powerful computer that the laws of physics allow us to make. So if you use anything, if you use a computer for anything, there is likely to be a way that you can use a quantum computer for it. It's not only that we're making the most powerful computer that the laws of physics allow us to make, what we're doing at Quantum Motion is that we're using the world's most scalable process to do it. So we simply turn transistors into qubits. Why is that important? You may have at least seen some of the very, very large market projections that people say quantum computers will have $1 trillion market share. And that's true. If you're building the world's most powerful computer, you are going to have an impact on every industrial process, medicine, pharmaceuticals. You'll be able to understand nature at its deepest level. But where some of these projections may fall short is in how expensive some of these other approaches are. If you're looking at a quantum computer today, this means that you're deploying these 10 to 100 qubits, and you're doing so at millions and millions of pounds for your system. And this isn't going to be the kind of machine like an NVIDIA GPU that then has mass global acceptance and then can address these massive markets. Instead, to put it starkly, many of these machines will be billion-dollar infrastructure scale investments, meaning that only nation states can afford them. And that, at the crux, is what Quantum Motion is addressing. By using a standard CMOS transistor, we can instead do that at 1% of the cost that any of these other approaches are likely to be able to achieve. And this is not just a vision, or maybe we can use transistors, which I'm very grateful that Ed and Oxford Sciences backed us when it was just a, we should do this with CMOS if we possibly can, because this year what we've shown is we can. We've deployed the world's first full-stack silicon CMOS quantum computer. We work with the government in the UK, we're working with the government in the US through the DARPA initiative, and this has been delivered in a 3-rack system so it can fit within a data center. I'll show a sketch of what that looks like in a data center, but it's not just this system that will fit within that footprint. It's actually going to thousands and indeed millions of qubits, all within that same footprint, because that tiny chip, each with your qubits of 100 nanometers across, it doesn't matter how big you get, your millions of qubits, the size is still the same. What's allowed us to do this is our deep relationships with IMEC and with Global Foundries. We've carried out 11 300mm wafer tape-outs on their standard processes over the past 5 years, demonstrating things like 99% fidelity of our qubit operations, as well as integrating thousands of qubits with conventional control electronics, multiplexers, digitizers, low noise amplifiers, all of the things you need, not just to make a single qubit, but to make a full functioning quantum computer. And this has happened, grown from the work of world leaders at Oxford and at University College London, so Simon Benjamin and John Morton, and chaired by the godfather of the EDA industry, Alberto San Giovanni Vincentelli, founder of 200 billion companies, Cadence and Synopsys. And we've been recently joined by Google Saleh, previous head of HPC at Google. And this is what has accelerated our commercialization over the past few months, now that we have this machine, which is ready to be deployed. Firstly, working with our partners, making sure that this full solution is ready to come to market and that we have the control solutions ready to deliver it. So you'll be seeing a little bit more, in fact, at the NVIDIA event next week about our relationship with them. But also on our customer and application side. So we've worked with Goldman Sachs, Boehringer Ingelheim, Moderna, Deloitte, demonstrating that a useful quantum computer needs millions of qubits. And this is the technology that they can back to get them there. Meaning that the path over the next 3 years is relatively clear. Over this past 3 years, we're developing that system, putting it into data center, working with the UK and US government. But then to get us to the point where by 2030 we're deploying utility scale quantum computers, the next 3 years is a journey of ecosystem growth, the same way that NVIDIA grew to its now $1 trillion market cap. working with universities, deploying these machines and getting end users to work with us. And that's what we're fundraising for right now. Part of the reason that I'm here is that building off of the support that we've been given, so we've raised 60 million to date from Bosch, Oxford, INCEF, Sony Innovation Fund, Porsche, and others. We now aim to deliver that utility scale system and de-risk that pathway so that in this next 3 years, with this kind of backing, we'll be able to deliver on the promise of a silicon CMOS-based utility scale quantum computer. But thank you very much for having me and for your attention.
James, thank you so much. And again, you can see how impressive I think the operation they've got. You know, these are not junior companies. They've been doing a lot. They've got some great fundraising in place. They've been working extremely hard. So hopefully you're in the right place now for the next big step. So I hope you've all got deep pockets today. That's what we're looking for, isn't it?
Yeah, so we start our conversations in the lab. We're taking ultimately the biggest risk. We're backing founders when it is just the science, and that's why the venture building piece around where we work with the founders to build the company is so important.
So you've all the hard work done almost.
We know that to maximize the success rate of our companies, we really need to engage with them. You can't just go into these ecosystems and write checks. You've got to work with the founders to help them build their companies in one shape or another. We've got a very different company next.
Okay, Alloyed, all right. Advanced metals manufacturing.
Yes, and I guess what I want, again, without stealing anyone's thunder, I think what Mike and the team are showing is that with some vision, you know, some of our companies are now moving into really exciting territory from a revenue perspective. So right at the beginning, some of the journeys to get the companies to revenue generation point takes time. We know it takes 10 to 15 years from start to sort of significant valuation inflection points. Alloyed is a great example of a company that is getting real revenue traction now and some incredible clients. Mike, over to you.
Here he is, Michael Holmes, CEO of Alloyed. Again, Advanced Metals. We're excited about this one. Everybody's excited about this.
Thank you, and it hasn't taken time. We're an 8-year-old company that I run. What we do is we apply world-leading digital platforms to the design and fabrication of better alloys and alloy components, principally but not entirely by 3D printing. We've got a team of about 200 people, and they operate across a range of sectors extending all the way from aerospace to electronics. But today I'm just going to talk about one particular line of activity. And I'm not actually raising money today. What I'm looking for is in-region production partners. And this business is the fabrication, test and supply of faster, cheaper, lighter, longer range microturbine jet engines to power affordable unmanned aircraft. Now, there are a range of civil and commercial applications for these engines, but the problem they're serving in the short term is military. And in particular, it's that both the offensive but more also the defensive options at the disposal of NATO for these aircraft are just too expensive and not actually fit for the conflicts into which we might be drawn. Now, that's a problem which has been on everybody's lips for some years now, and it's attracted a lot of procurement and industrial initiatives, as well as a plethora of startup activity and associated venture activity as well. But less well observed is that once you get beyond the range and payload for which battery propulsion is adequate, the options to use jet and rocket engines to propel these aircraft are worryingly slim. On the turbine side, at the large scale, large cruise missiles rely on expensive engines based on 1970s technology sourced from a range of suppliers who can't scale up fast enough to meet market demand. Coming down in size to smaller cruise missiles and drones, where you need to be really cheap, supply is also constrained, and the engines is just too expensive to do the job. And then right at the bottom, we're reliant on poorly constructed, hobbyist, engines with fragile and strategically unattractive supply chains. Alloy's materials and 3D printing platforms enable faster, lighter, more efficient engines that can fly further. They also allow the rapid, mission-specific design of more robust engines that can be produced to need in short order. We're building a three-part design, fabrication, and test platform that can already get engines from clean sheet through prototype and test to readiness for mass production in under 4 months. And by the beginning of next year, that will be under 1 month. For the first time, engine design cycles will be fast enough for drone and counter-drone design cycles. Manufacturing is modular with the minimum viable design footprint to produce, say, 100 engines a month, not much bigger than a tennis court. And in a world where countries are seeking to rearm, but also seeking to rearm on the basis of local production, this allows us to provide a quicker, more complete solution than the extensive cross-border negotiations about who's going to make the ear and who's going to make the foot and who's going to make the nose, which have characterized the first years of many European defense programs. We'll do the design, and then we'll invest our own capital or partner or license to secure local production in the procuring country. We've tested and flown these engines, and we'll be in serial production in Oxford from early next year, and we're ready for discussions with production partners in allied nations right away. It's reasonable to ask briefly what it is about alloys which enables this. And the answer is, in short, that these engines draw very heavily on a suite of materials, process, and design technologies that we've been developing very intensively since 2017, and before that at Oxford University. And also on extensive data to feed physical and AI models, which inform materials design, process optimization for performance and cost, and the design of the turbines themselves. These are technologies we've built by investing our own cash, but
it's also CUDA, which is a big...
Absolutely. So as I said, in chemicals, in running a Series A investment round in the coming 12 months, so also very open to having conversations about becoming a shareholder in Odqa.
Michael, we'll soon be seeing Alloyed Saudi Arabia. Is that what you want to see? You want the big sign up there with Alloyed Saudi Arabia?
Well, to be honest, what I'm looking for is a franchise production partner, so it could also be their name. The important thing is a partner that can make these things and can sell them to allies in the region.
Wow. Alloy Ramco, something like that, huh? Okay, who else have we got? James, Dr. James, Quantum Motion. Tell me what you're really looking for here.
I'm looking to build the ecosystem that allows us to not just deliver a single quantum computer, but to deliver millions of million-qubit systems. I think that's where we've seen how AI took off, was when you could actually deploy this and get hundreds of thousands of end users. That's what I want to do.
And I mean, that's the excitement here when that comes up. And then you're making it all simple for us. So again, come back to the fact that I think, you know, so many people are excited about this, yes. But for so many of us, it's that far away. You know, you think you're bringing it closer?
Yeah, I mean, I think the market is going to inflect in the next 3 years. We've launched the Quantum AI Data Center right in the heart of New York. We should have one right in the Middle East in addition. There's so many great industries here, they're going to benefit hugely from quantum. Now's the time to invest, and now's the time to expand.
You, Ed, excited about what you hear in the region. Clearly, you've come here for FII and all of these people here. And please, if any of you have a question, you know, I mean, we'll make sure that everybody's available to talk to you afterwards. But please let us know. But yeah. I mean, why is this so exciting a region for you?
We're super excited about the opportunity of being here. Look, the companies can speak for themselves.
Yes.
But you know, primarily, number one, helping our incredible businesses raise the capital that they need to deliver on the incredible outcomes that you've heard of. We do also have the opportunity to invest directly into OSE. So we have shareholders including Google Ventures, UK pension funds, some of the regional sovereign wealth funds. We would love to have some regional Saudi investors into OSE. But also we're here to partner. All of our companies need to win and want to win on the global stage. And so if we could build a regional launch pad here for these sorts of companies in Saudi to access the region, we would love to talk to you about that as well.
Any ideas from any of you? Who's got a few billion sitting around that needs a home? We can certainly help you out here. We can actually divide it equally and make sure that everybody is happy here and they go home safe.
I think we have a guest of honor.
Tell me, no, please. And I do, just stay with us because I'm going to let Ed introduce our guest of honor who's graced us with her presence. She's the busiest woman in the UK. Ed?
We're very, very privileged to have with us the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. I have to say, in so many ways, our founders can build companies themselves, but also many of the challenges they face are ones that can really only be helped, solved in conjunction and collaboration with government. And Rachel and the team, DCIT, DBT have just been incredibly helpful, I know, for us and many of our companies overcoming some of the challenges and barriers that we're trying to break through to build world-class businesses. So thank you for coming to close our session.
And we'll leave you the stage. We'll take a seat. Thank you again once again. The UK Chancellor of the Exchequer is with us. We're absolutely delighted. And she's been very busy this morning. She's already done a few sessions. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Ed, and also to our businesses who have come over to Riyadh to meet you and to do this session today. As Ed said, this is a real partnership between the public and private sector. The government are playing its part. We're investing in the Oxcam corridor to connect our two outstanding university cities with the towns and cities in between, to create a much bigger economic geography from which to recruit people to work at those start-up and scale-up businesses, to house the researchers and the innovators, and to critically ensure that Oxford and Cambridge can continue to grow to match the ambitions of the entrepreneurs and the founders who you've heard from today. So the government are playing its part in putting that investment into the infrastructure that we need, including building a new town on that route between Oxford and Cambridge, new rail links, new road links, more housing, changing the planning system so we can get more housing built, investing in the water infrastructure, including a new reservoir so that we can accommodate the new businesses and the new homes, and investing crucially in the digital infrastructure as well, very much helped by the inward investment we received at the US state visit to London just a few weeks ago. So we're playing our part. The businesses are playing their part by the amazing innovation that they are doing, creating some of the businesses and jobs of the future and some of the technologies that will transform our lives. And what we need now is that investment from the UK, and we've reformed our pension system to unlock that long-term patient capital, but also that investment from overseas, from sovereign wealth funds, from private equity, from venture capital. And that capital is needed both to help invest in the infrastructure, but also to directly invest in these businesses so that we can keep growing that ecosystem, that we can help these businesses and many, many more besides on that journey from the idea in the head of a PhD researcher or a young graduate, and take that idea all the way up through the startup funding, the scale-up funding, and then potentially, and I hope this will be your journey, to list on the London Stock Exchange. So there's huge opportunities in the UK. We're publishing that prospectus. This work is led in government by Lord Patrick Vallance, and the work that Ed is doing is absolutely crucial for realising this ambition of the government, of our whole country, and most importantly, of the brilliant founders and startup businesses that are making this a reality. So thanks very much for your support. There's lots to do, but lots that we can do together to unlock this huge potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Again, here she is, the Right Honourable Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK and Northern Ireland. But please let our team come up here and have a photo with you. But we're very encouraged with the great work that you're doing, as you say, to make sure the infrastructure is there, to make sure that actually companies like this can thrive, get the people down there, and you all stay there. And again, thank you for taking the time to come over with us. Gentlemen, you're all friends. Stay. You need to stay close to her. She can help you. How's our camera team here? Are they on the spot? We do have Minister Stockwell. Please, please. Oh, I mean, if I knew you were here, I'd have put you on the spot ages ago. Please come. We're delighted to have you Minister for Investment too. This is a real honor to have you all here. Thank you. And where's our ambassador? Now, come. Sir, please. I need you here. Thank you. Forgive me. There we go. Now, have we got anyone else? Your cousin, your mother's here? No? Okay. But well done. The work that you're all doing is absolutely phenomenal. I've never been so impressed and moved. And thank you all. Your Excellencies, thank you for coming with us, and thanks for being here. Okay. We have to clear the stage. We have another group coming on. It's very competitive on this stage, you know. So please meet our dear colleagues here, and you can arrange bilateral meetings for them. And once again, a great thanks to the Ambassador, the Minister, Her Excellency, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Take care. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not here alone. I am going to be joined for this session by Hakan bin Agil, Vice Chairman, Executive Board Member at Akbank, Daniel Hanna, Global Head of Sustainability Transition Finance over at Barclays. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, we're actually privileged that we have Dr. Sayeda Jafar. She is from Visa. And we have GV Ravishankar joining us, along with Dr. Klaus Homeds joining us on the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies.
How are you? Long time.
I thought I was going to be on my own there for a little while. Great to see you all. Thank you all for taking the time. It's an amazing gathering here at FII 2025. So here's the proposition that we're going to discuss. It's about frictionless, borderless fintech. Can it cross borders? Can you scale up? You know, or what are the problems in terms of data localization, capital concentration? Is big just always beautiful? And that's where we're going to start, because if you think about it, we've got Visa on this panel, we've got Barclays on this panel, we've got Akbank on this panel, we have somebody that's been in startups from Klarna to Revolut on this panel, and we have somebody that has been around the world in terms of advisory position to many different institutions with GV. So let's just talk about some of the data. We've got BCG saying 60% of fintech revenue is generated by less than 100 companies. Now that's what I call concentration risk. Let's start there. Good to see you, and thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. Akbank is a pretty sizable player in your market. How do you respond to that proposition that because you have size and scale, you will always be the dominant, and that it's pretty darn hard for small players to scale up? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. First of all, this is a great proposition actually. Seamless, borderless, frictionless ecosystem. But like in every business, there are challenges, especially if you go to a new market. There are lots of barriers, regulation, technology barriers. You have to understand the market. You have to understand the dynamics, the competition, incumbents there. Sometimes incumbents can be actually pretty progressive in terms of technology and so on. They have the brand, they have the technology, they have the financials and so on. So there are challenges. But having said this, this is a dream which can be done. As figures indicate, that can be done. There are some solutions for this. Maybe we can discuss in the second round.
Okay, so there are possibilities. Daniel, good afternoon. You're here with Barclays. You're Chief Sustainability, or in charge of sustainability. We were just chatting beforehand, and you said, look, Manis, yes, concentration is there. There is size and concentration, but this is becoming about sovereignty in terms of the risks around there. How do you see the proposition that small can actually scale up and compete with behemoths like Akbank, like Barclays, like Visa?
I mean, if a decade ago the ambition, as you said, was frictionless, borderless capital finance, and it was underpinned by this sort of concept that technology alone could create a global operating system. I think what the last few years have shown us is that's no longer the case. What really scales technology, what scales ideas right now, is not technology which can move money, but actually it's trust. Trust and permission and a license to kind of operate. And that permission does not travel borderless. I think there you have to build that trust. You have to have a global set of governance standards which all different markets can kind of feel comfortable with, but then operating very much within the local context. And so in my role, whether that is in some of the innovative, sustainable fintech companies that we see scaling, many of which are now pushing towards unicorn status, or financing structures that are really channeling capital to the transition, or even things like carbon markets, they only work when capital, data, and regulatory permissions come together.
Let's bring it to Visa. I mean, if there was ever the personification of size, scale, and perhaps the challenge of a moat. Can I say moat? Can I say moat around your business? It is Dr. Sayeda Jafar. Dr. Sayeda, I mean, you have the privilege of size and scale. So how do you look at the smaller the contender? How do you look at their ability to break that moat around the Barclays and the Visas of this world?
Payments, by its very definition, is a local business. Banking, name it, it's a local business at the end of the day. The way we look at it, the way we think about it is there are certain components, there are certain elements that are across borders, across geographies, that need to be standardized and uniform across the world. But then equally, very important, it needs to be localized. We are in Saudi. We need to be able to use a mother card. We need to be able to connect to the Saudi infrastructure. And we believe, as the world evolves, the number of options available to us as consumers will continue to evolve. As those options continue to evolve, the players that will be out there that will help us connect and leverage those options will also grow.
And do you look for more local connection, more local connectivity, more local players that you can partner with and maybe help them scale up?
Absolutely. So we partner with a number of local players across the world. So if I look at, again, if I look at just Saudi,
yeah,
the largest players, the STC banks of the world, Barqs of the world, the 360s of the world, these are all small, they used to be small, homegrown fintechs. They are all Visa partners. And I can name many, 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 many more. And they're growing up. And that's the level of partnership we have, and that's what we would like to see across the world.
GV, let's bring you into the conversation. Can you just explain to the audience a little bit about from the perspective that you come at this from, and perhaps what you've seen in this space, and what works for the challenger? Maybe there's somebody in here. I mean, so Martin Gilbert was in the audience, and he's gone, you know, he's the chairman of Revolut now. I remember Revolut when it was like, sorry, what's the name of that card? Who are they? And that is not what they are now. So give us your perspective.
A great question. Look, our living is based on the fact that young, small companies can disrupt the incumbents and big ones. So, you know, while the statistics say there's concentration, we are betting against this concentration over a period of time. Now, what we have seen is startups are able to focus on a niche problem so deeply and solve it so well. And especially if it's a local company in a local market, it's able to understand the nuances of the consumer so much better that they can solve for this a lot better. And what appears like a niche market initially gives them the wedge to enter a market, and then over time they kind of layer all the other products going on, right? So now I actually think Visa has been particularly smart in partnering with a lot of them. I mean, I sit on boards where Visa is probably a partner of most companies in the fintech space. And that's a way of saying, look, we've got to participate in the innovation that's coming in the market instead of trying to, you know, keep them out. So going back, I feel you're betting in favor of the young companies winning over time. And what we've seen in the last few years is just borders have been built everywhere. You know, the last 1 year particularly, you really have a challenge trying to transport companies one place to another, because every sovereign, going back to the point on sovereignty, people want a local player. Like we saw what happened in Ukraine, Russia, and how some of the networks were not allowed to operate at some point. And you know, so countries now are saying, look, I need to build my own network for payments, right? So we've seen that in India and RuPay, and we are starting to see in the Middle East as well, people trying to build networks and so on. So you're going to see more of this happen. And so I would say we have to bet on younger companies trying to disrupt and localize over time.
And I think, and this is where, obviously I made a slight mistake. Daniel, you were talking to me about trust. It was, of course, Dr. Klaus who was talking about sovereignty. I mean, it's across the conversation. Dr. Klaus, good afternoon. Personified trust. I mean, Dr. Saida talked about it. What does it mean for you and your perspective of trust, and how does that help a startup evolve?
Look, I'm looking at the whole infrastructure part as a part of a sovereignty of a certain continent, right? So payment is the oxygen of the economy. And if you are not in a self-defined mode to control these payment systems, then you are basically blackmailable. So if you can shut down credit card payments in a certain region of the world, you never know if you are the next region, if you fall in disgrace. So I think having an infrastructure that you own and that you are controlling that is very much important in order to be self-defined as a continent. So for the startups, this means that you basically, the biggest bridge that you need to work towards is what Revolut does. That on the one hand you have the account, but you have also all the different services that are loved. The product, you have a high cadence of new products that are loved, and that's how you basically proliferate your service. And then I got involved in SumUp, which creates the biggest network of point of sales, so that you are also sort of independent. So these are all little building blocks that probably one company alone can't solve for. So that's why it's important to look at it as an own ecosystem for a certain continent, and you need to complement the different tasks that a bank has to in an innovative way.
So let's talk about the regulation. I recently spent a couple of years living in the United States of America. It became very apparent that the Federal Reserve has a very different perspective in terms of who they want to allow access to the system. And so this goes, there's a wonderful phrase in Irish, and it's called me féin, myself. Me, myself, and I. And I think that's about sovereignty, protection of the regulator. So I want to ask each of you about the regulator and the central banks to a certain extent. Are they a hindrance? Are they good, solid governance against maybe questionable fintech? Dr. Saida, let's bring it to you first of all.
Sure. Look, I think regulation is important to make sure that we have a well-regulated, functioning financial system. That is what all of us want. And we want to make sure that we do it in a way that innovation is front and center, but we want to make sure that it is absolutely a strong, sound financial system. Now, the question that you asked is, how are regulators perceived? For us, we work with regulators a lot.
You were just about to say, we love regulators.
I was about to say, we actually love the fact that regulators want to work with us. We love the fact that regulators, and I'm speaking of Sama, right? We have an incredible relationship with Sama, because when Sama says, hey, we want to look at this, we sit down collaboratively. And we actually have a very, very open dialogue. We've had a multi-year relationship with Sama, with the regulators around the world, and we're able to get to a solution that is a good solution, both locally as well as globally. So for us, what's most critical is to have that open dialogue, to make sure that the discussions are happening. Because without that open and honest dialogue, it's very difficult to get to where we need to get to. But as long as that dialogue is there and that fundamental level of trust is there, you will get to the right solution.
I think we should do a word count at the end of this session and go, how many times have we used the word trust? Because it's pervasive in each of your thinking. Daniel, to you, the regulator, the central bank, good relationship, good gatekeeper, or protective moat for people like Barclays. Why not be a bit provocative? What do you think?
So I think the era of scale first, regulate later, that's gone. I think regulators now are partners, they are co-architects. The institutions that are going to succeed in this environment are those that can work with the regulator, not try and think around them. And I think that's very much the case that we see for successful fintechs really scaling. And as a bank, I think where we can play a really interesting role for innovative disruptors is really being the gateway to those regulated environments. Okay. We operate multi-jurisdictional. We're obviously in the UK, in the US. We announced this week our regional headquarters and provisional CMA license here in Saudi. And so where fintech is emerging and wants to operate within the moat that you talk about, we can then provide that partnership to help work with them on that.
I think that's an interesting perspective. Hakan, you're a very different geography, perhaps a very different, we're very acclimatized to the Fed, the Bank of England, the various UK regulators, the British regulators, the European regulators. But from your perspective, talk to me about the regulator and the central bank in terms of enabling, helping, or just being a strong guardian of new entrants.
Yes. Actually, it doesn't really make any difference where you are, globally, because every regulator would like to have actually a robust, trustworthy financial system.
Yes, we learned a thing or two. It was 2008.
Yeah, doesn't really make any difference. I think the amount of regulation, the right balance, I guess, is the right thing. So I think we also have to understand the regulators, the monetary policy, for example. I mean, of course, they have to manage the monetary policy, the amount of credit, the growth, and so on. So there are lots of concerns about data, actually, issues. This cloud systems, whether the data should be out of the country, within the country, all these data, AML issues, know your customer issues, and so on. I think it is understandable, but I think, again, that there should be a balance, because we also have to realize the fact that the financial system has to progress, so that it shouldn't be blocking all these new trends, new technologies, and so on. So we have to cooperate.
Okay, we're going to get a bit of value for money. We've got 6 minutes left. So I want a very short, sharp answer to the next question, and then we talk about scale. Do we have the balance right in terms of regulation? Is it at the right point for the fintech, for the future of fintech? Daniel, or have we got the right balance? And then we just go down the line, a quick, short, sharp answer.
I think the world is moving so fluidly that question in itself is moving fluidly. So for where we are right now, yes, but as technology evolves, as systems evolve, that also needs to evolve with it.
Saida, Dr. Saida, the balance?
Fully agree. I think it's not about whether the balance is right today, because probably at this very moment the balance is not right. But what's more important than that is, are we constantly readjusting and making sure that we're getting to the right balance?
Then that means that the regulators have got to listen. GV?
I'd say regulation trails entrepreneurship most times, and there's a lot of speeding up to do for young companies to be allowed to innovate as much as they innovate today.
I've got to say, I'm a little bit more enlightened by what Barclays and Visa do in terms of enabling the new protagonists on the block. But I wonder, has that got sort of bigger ambitions in terms of, if you keep it in the family, you grow it. Regulation, the right light touch or a heavy footprint?
Look, the US innovates, the Chinese copy, and the Europeans regulate. So it's our core competence, so probably over-indexing a little bit. Yeah, if you look at Germany in particular, so you are paralyzed with the Wirecard scandal. So you're becoming very, very cautious. And I would say, I had the discussion with the regulator and saying, look, it was probably a 20 billion market cap damage, but what you created on regulatory hurdles over the next 10 years was more than 20 billion in damage. So at the end, the regulator should not forget that he should create a market and a market security. And he cannot be the gatekeeper of a functioning business model or not, because that is the market and not the regulatory part. So I tend to fear that they are over-regulating, because the next chaos they will anyways not prevent. Yeah? So I think a little bit more facilitating the necessary change of innovation coming into an ecosystem, that should also be one of their aims.
I'm going to change direction because you brought up Wirecard, and I just want to ask very, very quickly, because they're strict on time on this. The reverberations from Wirecard in your world, do you think what Klaus is saying is correct in terms of the over regulation as a result of Wirecard? Has it come into your thinking at all?
It's not the case, actually, in our country.
Yep.
Technology is moving so fast. We are all learning. Regulators are also learning. A little bit maybe behind the curve, but by nature,
Yeah, well, we don't know the problems until they actually explode in front of us, do they? Very briefly, because time is running down, Daniel, and then Saida, and then GV.
Well, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about the importance of trust, and that importance.
And
of
that
trust,
broke trust, really, didn't it?
And therefore, that need to have trust, and then that interoperability across different national standards, taking into consideration local governance, but then global bank quality standard governance as well, I think is really key. So, every time that gets challenged, the regulators will naturally ask the question and tighten things further. And also, as technology evolves, we've also got to ask the question around how we can provide that trust and execution efficiency at the same time.
And I know, Dr. Sadie, you talked a lot about SAMA, et cetera, but the reverberations of that story from a news perspective, from a markets perspective, from a regulations perspective, just give us your take.
Look, fraud and risk is something that is very much top of mind for us as Visa. In the last 5 years, we've invested more than 10 billion in making sure we are continuously combating fraud and creating that level of trust across the world. It is something we think about day in and day out. In the region, in the kingdom, every single time that you use your Visa credential, every single time, 500 unique parameters are extracted from that transaction that is scored against a model, against the 300 billion plus transactions that we see on an annual basis, and then that returns a probabilistic score. It is something we think about day in and day out.
And that's good. And that's music to my ears kind of thing. Although I would say this, try and open a bank account in America and remove money from it. Now there's one to consider. That's what you call regulation within and into its life. GV, the closing statement to you, 1 minute, 14 seconds.
Yeah,
Don't
so
eat
look,
it all.
I invest in India, I invest in this region. Both have very strong regulators. The Reserve Bank of India and the SAMA here are strong regulators, and also conservative, meaning they will kind of not let things go out of control. And I think that is required to continue to build trust from the consumer side on the ecosystem and on the infrastructure that the government has built and enabled. So I think, while Wirecard kind of things does shake this a little bit, each regulator goes back and reflects saying, look, their main thing is to make sure these systems don't break and trust is never broken from a consumer perspective. So I think these are good things. We learn and evolve from these kinds of
Trust is a wonderful thing, and it is to be earned. Ladies and gentlemen, your panel today.
With consider.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I am an anchor for Bloomberg Television, and I spend a lot of my time talking about this precise topic, public markets, private markets. I spent a lot of airtime this morning talking about the explosion of interest in private capital, so this is a really opportune moment to pick out some of the themes. Let me give you a few statistics. Those viewers of the show will know that I love my numbers. Private markets have tripled in size over the past decade. Some reports project that private markets could grow from $13 trillion today globally to around $20 trillion by 2030. Within private markets, this isn't going to come as a surprise to anyone, private credit is the fastest growing segment. So this year, AUM in private credit reached $1.7 trillion. Now, of course, we know public markets are much larger in value, but they now include fewer listed companies, especially in the United States and other mature economies around the world. And this is another interesting statistic I thought I would bring to you. The median age of a US IPO company is now over 12 years, up from 4 years in the 1990s, which also is super interesting. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how private and public markets coexist, how they compete, how they converge. Let me introduce our panelists. To my left, Laura Cha, Director of the Board of the Bretton Woods Committee and former Chairman of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. To her left, we have Andy Saperstein, Co-President of Morgan Stanley. We have Roberto Hornweg, Global Co-Head of Corporate and Investment Banking and CEO of the Americas, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East in Standard Chartered. Then we've got Martin Gilbert, Revolut and River Global Chairman. And to his left, Mr. Tetsuya Suzuki, Senior Managing Executive Officer, Head of Investment Banking Solutions, SMBC Nikko Securities. Okay, Laura, I'm just going to start out with you.
Okay.
Why are companies staying private for longer?
I think there are two reasons. One is the attractiveness of the private market and the availability of capital in the private market. Like Larry Fink said this morning at the Changemaker Roundtable, he said they're just flush of money, the capital, the capital market. So, you know, on the private side, there are the availability of credit that the companies can stay private. There's not an urge to go to raise fund in the public market. The second reason, which I think is very important, and coming from somebody from the exchange and a former regulator, is that it has become very onerous to comply with a lot of the regulation. You know, if one remember back in the 20-some years ago, it was Sarbanes-Oxley, and then it was Dodd-Frank. Every financial crisis brings more regulations. So the cost of compliance of being a public company has increased. So at the same time, when you have the attractiveness and the easy availability of private credit, there's no reason why people would want to stay private a little longer.
Yeah. How have banks had to adapt to the phenomenon that Laura just described now?
Sure. So I agree with everything you said, and I love all the statistics. You know, the number of public companies has actually shrank over the last few years, and I can't imagine that the trends won't continue. We're meeting the needs of the private companies, and in some ways it's been symbiotic. If you think about what the banks have done and the rise of the private markets, companies, to your point, aren't going public as quickly. They can generate a lot of wealth while they're private, which is different than it used to be years ago. And I think that there's a real question that a lot of them will have of should they ever go public, and why would they? And so
we can put that question to Martin in a second. We can put that question to Martin in a second.
Oh, okay. I will follow off on that one. So then I guess the question remains for the banks, which how can we fill that need? Because we have clients that are looking to get private shares, that are looking to get private assets, and we'll meet and we met that need. We match the supply and the demand, and basically our clients have figured out that you can get great returns, you can get risk-adjusted returns by investing in the private markets.
Yeah.
So we help the growth.
Roberto, I'm going to put the question to you another way. Why do you think AUM and private capital has grown so much the last few years? What has been the appeal?
Yeah, I think, well, you have to start with the genesis, which was banks were in a maturity transformation game that created a ton of systemic risk, as we saw in 2008.
Yeah.
So if you think of what the regulators have done globally since then, if they sort of curbed the ability for banks to play in a very long-dated asset game, some would say for very good reasons. And so you have this emergence of private credit, which really is able to match
liabilities with the asset duration. With that, that's also the reason why they don't need to go public, because they can stay longer and the liabilities there and there's management there. You couple that with this massive amount of liquidity that's in these long-dated vehicles, and they can then chase and dictate very good credit terms for them, but also help the companies and give them liquidity, which doesn't need to be repaid quickly because it's long-dated. So it's sort of a perfect union of needs. Now the question is, going forward, is that demand gone so far? Is there a lot of competition? Is there slippage in credit terms?
Yeah.
And you know, we've seen a lot of value in that private credit market, but you are seeing in the last few weeks, loan markets sell off a bit, not public bond markets, but there's still it's still way too early to call it, to think that there's any issues, just because as a percentage of the overall debt stock, it's still not that high.
Well, we'll get there. It's some credit issues, but I mean, what do you make of people who say private credit is just public credit that doesn't mark to market?
That doesn't mark to market?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I grew up as a macro trader. I love mark to market because if you can press return and see what something's worth, it gives you the true NAV.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, through cycles and accounting cycles for public companies and bank balance sheets, that would be disastrous, and it's not truly reflective of value. So I sort of disagree with that a bit. I think that I'm sure all the very sophisticated private credit companies in their heads mark to market because they have a forward liability of a NAV versus their, I don't know, insurance liabilities or whatever they are, that can be systemic if they're not met. And they're very, very good credit selectors, and they're very good operators of companies from their private equity experience.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's a bit cynical, but there's a little bit to it.
Yeah, it's a soundbite. I guess that's what we do sometimes in the news. Martin, people want to know when, if Revolut is going to IPO.
Yeah,
Still a private company. Walk us through, no, maybe let's just start, walk us through the journey of why Revolut is still a private company.
Well, I suppose, I mean, if we were public in the UK, we'd be the second biggest bank. I mean, that's how valuable the business has grown over a 10-year period. I mean, I think, you know, one of the other reasons you don't want to go public is you can keep out of the public domain, the analysts following you, and you can make long-term decisions. And I remember one of the founders of TPG saying to me, as a director of a private company, I know far more than you do of being a non-executive on a public company, by the way. He said, I've got a team preparing me for the board meetings. And I think that sums up what the shareholders of the private markets are. They're real owners of the business, actually, and that's one thing we should bear in mind. So we're not, so hence the reason we're seeing this massive decline in a number of public companies and companies staying private for longer. So for Revolut, I mean, we just did a secondary at a $4 billion secondary. Now, I mean, these are massive amounts of money. I mean, this would dwarf a lot of public company trading in a year, or how much people could raise in an IPO. This is $4 billion.
And I'm sure they're oversubscribed.
Yeah, oversubscribed. I mean, we've got more buyers than sellers at $4 billion. We can't find the sellers, but that's normal, as you know. I mean, when people don't want to sell when someone wants to buy their stock.
Yeah.
They only want to sell when they can't find a buyer.
Always the way.
Yeah. So there's no real need to go public at this stage because we don't need capital. So those are a number of reasons.
Okay.
But so there's no rush now. And then if you are going public, where would you go public? Really the only market with the deep liquidity necessary is probably NASDAQ as well. So we're all being forced more.
Not the London Stock Exchange?
London Stock Exchange are trying hard to retain the Revoluts of this world, but there's this stamp duty at 0.5%. Now the government are talking about waiving that for the first year, which would be a start. But 0.5% stamp duty is a very big problem for people when they want to buy. It's also not as liquid as NASDAQ. NASDAQ has really become the home of fintech.
These tech listings.
Yeah.
We can talk about that. One final thing just before I move on, because you mentioned it. I think President Trump floated the possibility of moving away from quarterly earnings cycles.
Yeah, I mean, that's a step in the right direction. We already have that in the UK, but almost you want to be annual reporting, don't you? So you can make these long-term decisions. And that's why you see companies, you know, like the bid probably for Janus Henderson, which is a big one in the UK today, going from, in an industry that is under stress, going into the private domain so they can actually rebuild properly and then come back, which inevitably will happen with Nelson Peltz, by the way.
Yeah.
Good guy, Nelson.
Mr. Tetsuya, so I've actually been reading a lot of articles recently, and we've conducted them in Bloomberg interviews about the private equity opportunity in Japan right now, and that it's just ripe for the taking. So maybe just walk us through what exactly is allowing the what is it about the circumstances today that have brought in all of this interest from PE firms all of a sudden?
Right, thank you very much. So let me step back and share my thoughts regarding how I see the market. This may be unique to Japan, but examine a Japanese company. Scan the whole capital structure from top to bottom, starting from equity, the very bottom of the capital structure. Think about who drives pricing. When we do equity offering for a Japanese company, a blue chip company, guess what the allocation is to Japanese institutional investors? Percentage-wise. It's 5%. Only 5%. So the price of risk, the required return for equity in Japan, for Japanese shares, is dictated by global institutional investors. However, when you take a look at the upper half of the capital structure, debt, it is a very different story. Pricing of debt is dictated by Japanese domestic investors. As you may know, in Japan, there's only two buckets for debt: risky or safe. And as an issuer, if you're in the safe bucket, good for you. You will enjoy tight spreads. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but what this really means is that you have two very different types of investors participating in different parts of the capital structure of the same company. And this leads to, I would say, kink, non-linear payoff regarding pricing of risk within the same capital structure. Also, bear in mind, Japan, we have been experiencing negative real rates over the last 30 years.
Yes.
Most of the time, right? Just to give you the magnitude, current CPI, excluding fresh foods and energy, is 3%. However, the short-term rate is 50 basis points, 0.5%. So the market dislocation I talked about does get amplified depending on how you put the leverage and how you formulate their capital structure. And there are so many things happening globally as we speak. As for Japan, it is reform of corporate governance that is prompting more M&As, spin-offs, MBOs, share buybacks. Many things are happening. So when you combine all these factors, when you think about all these factors, put it in a mix, shake them up, interesting opportunities will arise. And when I look at the market through such a lens, what the private market can do can be appealing, coming up with tailored solution.
Yeah.
And it is really, really timely and top of mind for me.
Laura, I want to pick up on something that Martin was talking about the sort of the process of number one, deciding to IPO, and two, deciding where to IPO. In your capacity as former chairman of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, you've had many of these types of discussions over the years. Has there been a change in attitude, do you think, out of companies in terms of where and timing?
I think Hong Kong is in a very unique position. We realize in the public market globally, the number of listed companies has really been on the decline.
Yeah.
In Hong Kong, we are in the opposite direction because of the growth of the Chinese market. A lot of the Chinese company, whether it's startup, whether it's healthcare, whether it's now technology, AI, and in the earlier day is the payment system, the e-platform. So all of these companies, when they look for funding in the public market, Hong Kong is the place to go. And so this year alone, Hong Kong is going to be the #1 IPO market in the world. We have about 69 companies listed already this year, and there are more coming, a couple hundred in the pipeline. And so we are kind of bucking the trend, but at the same time, I want to say that the public market and the private market coexist. They complement each other. Sometimes, when in the private market they want to exit, usually going public is the route. But if the valuation is not good, when there's not, in the cycle, they will withhold because they don't need the urgency to go to the public market as, let's say, a decade or so ago, or maybe 2 decades ago. So that is on the one hand. And on the other hand, the public market provide transparency, easy exit. If you are an investor, you go into a company, you have all the disclosure, transparent, and you can exit anytime. Whereas in a private market, yes, you do have the attractiveness of getting in the early stage, let's say, of a new startup. But it's not that easy to get out. It's more long term. So I think public and private markets serve different functions. From the investor's point of view, I mean, you could probably, and I think there are some fund management company already come up with products that are integrated. There's public side and the private side. So it really offers more choices to the investors.
Andy, I want to pick up on something that Laura said, which is it's not easy to get out of positions, right? If you're in the private side. Maybe let's just turn it to now, like what's happening right now. We are seeing somewhat of a revival in deal making and IPO activity in the US, even in Europe as well. How do you think that's going to trickle down?
So I'll talk about it in two different ways. First, I agree. Right now, one of the issues around the private market is that it's hard to get out. It's permanent capital. I think that's going to change. I think you'll have a complete blurring of the private and public markets. I think basically you'll be able to trade private market shares on secondary markets, and at some point I think that there'll be a complete and total blurring. But it's just a matter of time before banks and frankly other exchanges make private company shares available on public markets. In terms of,
Can I just ask you as a follow-up to that? I mean, what is an alternative exit strategy if you're a PE firm with a whole bunch of these portfolio companies, but that is not an IPO? I mean, what do you make of these continuation vehicles that are coming to the market?
So I think you're going to see a lot more of them. I think what you're going to find is, and I'll give you a couple of different examples. There are actual employees within private companies that are looking for liquidity. Today, they can just sell those private shares, but there's no organized way to do it. I think there'll literally be markets where you can sell private shares on the public markets. I think the demand is there from the PE firms. The demand is there for the private market companies. The demand is there from the private market employees. And I was just thinking back to the answer a little bit earlier, where I do think that over time the government will reduce how onerous it is to go public, and at the same time they'll probably increase the amount of disclosure that private companies need to give.
Yeah.
And frankly, even if the government didn't do it, I think private companies have the incentive to increase the disclosure that they give because they'll attract more capital.
Well, especially if it opens up to retail investors, they may have to go in that direction. Roberto, so we had Jim Chanos, not me, but one of my colleagues at Bloomberg Television was speaking to him, and he said he's very dubious about private credit only because you're getting senior debt exposure with equity-like returns. How can that be? The question here, I guess, is, are investors being adequately compensated for the risk they're taking?
I think it's a very good comment. And if you think of what Andy just said, you're thinking, okay, why isn't this liquidity developed? The technology is there already, and it's a transparency issue. So, I mean, you can call it a extension vehicle, but a continuation vehicle, or the rise in PIK and pay in kind things we've seen, to me, talk of a little bit of a stress in exit and valuation. It comes back to your previous question also on mark-to-market versus non-mark-to-market. So the lack of transparency now, the strong hands here have been the investors, not the people who have borrowed the money. And I fully agree with what Andy just said. The future, whatever the regulators do, has to be a little bit of a reset in that private versus public regulation, transparency, etc., to make it non-arbitrageable. It started, as I said before, as an arbitrage between bank capital, maturity transformation, and long-dated liabilities, but it's grown to a level where there's this value differential that is coming into question. To me, when I see more continuation vehicles, I don't think, oh, we need more liquidity, that's why there's a continuation vehicle. My instinct is to say, maybe the exit at that price isn't really there.
Right.
And so we have to see where it settles. And I think that the balance is very much towards what Andy says will end up from a regulatory and liquidity perspective.
Yeah, well, a few years ago, what was it, 2020, 2021, we were talking about SPACs, and you had all of these companies racing to take advantage of these very high valuations to come to market in any shape or format. Today, people talk once again about the possibility of there being too much froth in the market, too much hype around AI. I mean, is there a part of you that thinks maybe we should lock in this valuation now in case this whole thing doesn't work out next year?
Look, I always remember the founder of Oaktree saying, let's simplify this whole business. You're either an owner or a lender, okay? And if you're a lender, you just want repaid. If you're an owner, you've got to own the business.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, as I say, private equity is probably better than public markets. But as to whether valuations are frothy or not, I mean, look, we go through cycles in this in this business. So yeah, I'm the worst judge of markets, by the way. So, but what I would say, another thing I would say is Revolut is the exception here. That there's more buyers than sellers. Most private companies, there's more sellers than buyers, by the way. So if you are going to lend in private markets and private debt or invest in private equity, you've got to know that you're not going to get liquidity until the founder of that business or the owner of that business wants you to have liquidity. Then what happens, typically in the cycle, they announce a IPO. The IPO is often just an advert for a trade sale, by the way, because they would prefer the trade sale often than the IPO. And if you're a buyer of that business, you're better to buy in the run-up to the IPO rather than pay a 40% premium a couple of years later. So, but as I say, Revolut very much the exception with this exceptional demand at the moment to buy the shares.
Yeah. Mr. Tatsuya, I want to ask you, unfortunately for you, you got a news journalist on your panel, and there's been a lot of news in Japan in the past couple of weeks. Let me ask you how the arrival of Japan's first female Prime Minister, Takaichi-san, you think changes the business investing environment over the next foreseeable future?
The market reception has been very constructive and positive. We have hit 50,000 in Nikkei, right? And the last time we hit the highest level was 1989.
Even President Trump congratulated your Prime Minister today.
Yes.
He's very happy at the Japanese stock market performance.
So I think for Japan, usually change of Prime Minister didn't mean anything, right? But Abe-san made a big reform, and Takaichi-san is the same kind of school of thoughts. Expansionary, but one thing which was quite different from when Abe-san was the Prime Minister is that at that time, Japan was really facing a deflation pressure. So kind of a chronic disease, right? But now we're in the inflation period. So can you do an expansionary economic policy in this environment is a challenge. And as we all know that JGB, 250% around of GDP is the issuance volume. So can you expand without sacrificing this is a challenge. So the reality will kick in, but so far so good. And I would say people have been really waiting for change. So there's a lot of hope.
Okay, I've got to tell you, there is a QR code up there. I should have told you 2 minutes ago, but there's a QR code there. If you scan it, there's a question on where you want to invest right now, private or public markets. So I'm going to do a quick fire round of questions right now to our panelists while you answer that. My final question to everybody is, do you think we are at peak private markets momentum? Literally 20-second answer.
What is your question?
Are we at peak private markets momentum?
I am not a good judge for that, but I think it is cyclical. There are times when the public market is at its height and then the private market is trying to catch up. I think now it's the other way around.
I think I don't think that we're at the peak at all. I think I agree that while it's cyclical, I think the private markets are just starting to ramp up, and will continue to do so.
And will continue to do so.
Yeah.
Not at peak at all. If you look at overall capital and where it's invested, there's way more to run for private markets. But private markets and private credit, it's not a beta trade. It's idiosyncratic, and you have to pick the winners and losers. For everything we've said, there'll be regulation, harmonization, liquidity harmonization. But as an overall aggregate asset class, nowhere near peak.
I think we're at probably near peak valuation. I don't think we're near peak volumes, though. And I think that's a big difference. But I do like the public markets a lot at the moment, especially when you go down below the big market cap stocks. I think there's incredible value there, which is, of course, why private equity are buying them all. So, yeah.
Well, I think, at least for Japan, there's a lot of inefficiencies where the private market can probably monetize quicker than what the public market can do. So
Great.
we're not at the peak yet.
Okay, fantastic. Let's see the results of our survey. Will they come up? I guess, yeah, there you go. Where do you see the greatest investment returns? That was the question. Private markets. Okay,
Wow.
well, I think everyone's in harmony here. Panelists, thank you so much. That was great. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I had never seen this video before. It's pretty cool, yeah? My name is Amena Bakr, and I'm head of research at Kepler in the Middle East. I'm honored to be here today. Thank you very much for joining us. We have a very, very exciting panel today. As you've heard many, many times, we need more energy. We need more energies of various types. So investing in green hydrogen is an area that clearly Saudi Arabia is leading the way. And I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of NEOM Green Hydrogen Company, Wissam Al-Ghamdi. Please join me. Cool video, Wissam. Very nice.
Thank you, Amina.
But I want to start off with the fact that, I mean, the Hydrogen Council, they have a stat basically saying that investment promised in the green hydrogen sector was around 680 billion and only 11% of that being realized. What makes NEOM different, bankable, and obviously 80% complete?
Thank you, Amina. I think the question goes back to the basics, the typical. So if you want to talk about the lessons where NEOM Green Hydrogen applied for this to be bankability, so those two keywords. Basically, look at your competitive edge. See how do you put a business case where your economics will actually work. So a couple of elements I want to focus on to answer this question. First of all, it comes back to finding the right partners. So I want to start with that. Between Aqua Power and NEOM and Air Products, I think we have the perfect combination of what they bring to not just the investment part of it. They bring know-how, they bring technology, they bring center of excellence. So that's definitely was one of the key elements for our business case to go through. Then you're talking about the scale.
Sure.
So you need
mega scale,
you need to find the right scale where that economical basis balance between your capex and your opex, and of course the long-term sustainability afterwards. An important factor for us is also the offtake with Air Products. Air Products being the shareholder and also the offtaker for 30 years definitely gives an assurance and a confidence for the investors. And then the location.
For sure.
And I think I can talk about the location in two ways, NEOM being the company and NEOM being the location. There is a lot of value we get from being in NEOM. One that goes into the cost advantage is the abundance of solar and wind in NEOM and how competitive this can be for us, especially since we're building our captive solar and wind plant. As well, being in Oxagon and being in the industrial city of NEOM is definitely a great value for us. The proximity to the port, the logistical services, the one-stop shop.
So you have the land, you have the port, you have the offtake agreement, the financing, but would you agree with me that policy is kind of the main driver here?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you're talking about putting the business case, if you are in a country where where the road is not paved for investors to build something at a scale that was never built before. So where is that confidence? Where is the backbone required? Even the policy and regulations. So the infrastructure is definitely available, and the kingdom is definitely committed to the net zero and decarbonization.
Okay, and what kind of role does NEOM play in that? I mean, being part of this vision. Is it kind of a what will you contribute? You mentioned the solar panel project and the wind project. Is there a chance to perhaps connect to the grid, or is this just powering the project for now?
Well, let me expand more about the role of NEOM again. So the location, as I mentioned before, gives us competitive edge in terms of the efficiency and the cost of power. NEOM Green Hydrogen is over 300 kilometers in terms of space between solar, wind, and the green hydrogen. Then I can also talk about NEOM in terms of systems and policies. NEOM is very strong in terms of sustainability. They are very focused in terms of environment, and that drives definitely our goal. I also want to talk about NEOM in terms of the company, and especially in Oxagon. Being an Oxagon as an industrial city that is making, as I said before, the one-stop shop for investors.
Sure.
You go to Oxagon for basically permitting, land, licenses.
Everything.
And then it goes beyond to also the great services we've been getting from the port, being next to the green hydrogen. We received all of our 257 wind turbines through NEOM's port.
Oh, Amazing.
We received all the major equipment that you've seen, I think, in the hydrogen plant, the hydrogen vessels, the cold box, which is an important piece, part of the air separation unit to produce the nitrogen, the electrolyzers. So it's definitely growing into an industrial city where people can simply find their way to invest.
Sam, talk to us a little bit about the technology. What gives NEOM the edge? What kind of technology are you using? And the buzzword these days, AI, right? So how does that kind of play into this scale of project?
Well, I guess a couple of things I can talk about when it comes to technology. So let's get to the major piece. The biggest part of technology for us in the green hydrogen is the electrolyzers.
Okay.
And the way we approached all the technology aspects, and I can mention a couple of technology providers, it's not simply a transactional part. We're not just buying the technology and then it stops there. We're like with ThyssenKrupp Nucera, we're going with an R&D program and research and development to make sure we continue to advance the technology, make sure we find better solutions to maintain it, more solutions to make more out of it. Topso, for example, is the provider for the ammonia plant. Envision is our provider for the wind turbines. Baker Hughes for the hydrogen compressors. And between all, we've got different kind of partnerships, whether it's the long-term agreements, whether it's localizing some of the parts to be like the hydrogen compressors, all manufactured and built in Saudi. And we're working with all of them really in terms of partnership and not simply as transactional. Now back to your point on your in AI and digitalization. I think in a previous conference we were talking about AI and digitalization and said, look, we should really learn from the previous industries that took many, many years to be where they are, whether it's petrochemicals, oil and gas, mining, you name it. What happens typically is someone like NEOM Green Hydrogen and the investors make the bold decision to be the one to first to build at scale and lead the industry. But often, years later, you find out the engineering companies or software developers or AI and digitalization come then, and we don't want that to happen now. We want to jumpstart by actually designing and building to be AI ready. We're actually looking at doing digital twin today, so it'd be ready day one for us in 2027, and other examples for AI and digitalization.
Oh, excellent. The next step for NEOM, do you think that this is something that, I mean, we have the lesson learned here. Do you think that this is something that could be achieved elsewhere in the world, given, I mean, your experience?
Well, I think if I go back to the first question when I talked about the elements that we use in our business case, replicability is definitely there. People can replicate this. They just need to look at where they are, what are the competitive advantages they can capitalize their capex on. They could be hindered by maybe policy or lack of infrastructure, but there is always the parts that they can capitalize on to get this done. So basically, NEOM Green Hydrogen, our focus today is on finishing the construction, building the company, get to the operation in 2027, stabilize it from there, and then, of course, take it to optimize further. And knowing our shareholders, NEOM, Air Products, and Aqua, growth is the only way forward.
And everything's on track. I mean, the 80% now, and you are on track to reach all these milestones. Is it fair to say that?
Yes. So the solar plant is actually all complete in terms of the 5.5 million panels. We're going through commissioning activities in solar. Wind, you've seen the wind turbines, over 70% have been installed. And by mid next year, it will be the time when we'll start to generate power from solar and wind. And it's done by design because we need that power for the hydrogen plant to start the commission and startup. I guess also the video says it all. When you look at the hydrogen plant, you can see clearly all the major equipment. The ASU part is complete, the storage vessel is complete, the jetty is complete, the installation, the electrolyzers is going on track for sure.
Wissam, did you face any challenges in finding human resources? You mentioned a little bit about building components here in Saudi Arabia. How do you train new staff to work in this sector?
Well, the answer yes and no. There are challenges for sure for many reasons. Maybe I'll start with the reasons. So we're building the largest hydrogen plant at scale. No one ever yet worked at such a plant. Yet, the good answer for us, and we are blessed in Saudi Arabia with the really good base of operators, technicians, mechanical personnel, engineers from the different industries that are around. But also, our approach to recruitment was basically to look into build the company to be as diverse as it can be, because we're building the largest in the world, and probably we need people from all over the world.
Sure.
We're mixing between people with some hydrogen experience, industrial experience, and we're also doing our own in terms of developing. So we get fresh grads that we have taken to the Energy and Water Academy at a tailored program for renewable and green hydrogen.
Right.
And you need all of this for actually to build up a strong organization to start, and then sustainable for the future.
For sure. One other issue, I mean, you mentioned that, I mean, you do have an offtake agreement, so that part is already done. But more broadly, do you think that there is demand for hydrogen, and I won't say green, I will say all colors. Is there space for hydrogen in this market?
Well, I guess everyone knows the answer to the question. It's always the question of what is the extent and when. So the question when it comes to hydrogen, green hydrogen or otherwise,
right.
it's not F, it's when and how.
Yeah.
We know of industries like the heavy industries ready today to start in green hydrogen. Transportation is next.
Yeah.
You follow the news and you hear that even the aviation is probably going to put even penalties 2030 and beyond if you don't have SAF and eSAF. And the organization and the application continues. Reflect on a personal experience of mine before coming to NEOM Green Hydrogen. In the mining sector, we were looking into hydrogen to decarbonize some of the industrial applications. So the applications will continue to grow. There are some ready, and there are some will be much sooner.
Is it related to regions, or would you say like it's just a matter of time and it's just going to pick up worldwide, or are you seeing like patches?
It's got to be worldwide. It may be different in a place than another, but again, step back and look at why hydrogen. We're talking about climate change, we're talking about the decarbonization, and that's the goal for every country. All of the major countries got their net zero goals already defined by 2060.
Sure.
So is it just us? For sure not. It's everyone. It's the answer to the climate change, to the fight on the climate change.
No, absolutely. It's all about reducing emissions at the end of the day, and taking Saudi Arabia taking a step like this is brave, but also it'll pay off. Wissam, I'm going to give you a few minutes to kind of tell us where you see, I mean, once you start commissioning and producing, do you see NEOM maybe growing, or NEOM green hydrogen growing beyond this scale? Is it scalable still, or are you going to stick with the current capacity?
Well, as I said before, I think, again, our focus is doing what we're doing now, finishing the construction. Next year is going to be busy with a lot of commissioning and startup activities,
sure.
Followed by the commercial operation and then stabilizing the operation. So that's our focus now. And again, then it comes to the typical evolution of a plant. Once you get to stable operation and you start to understand your plan, then you understand the baseline, you start to look at optimization, you start to look at further business development ideas, you start to look at organic and inorganic growth. And again, at the end, I'll say it again, between the three shareholders, I'm sure this is a goal for them to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking forward to more growth and success stories out of NEOM and NEOM Green Hydrogen. Wissam, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thank you, Amina. I appreciate it.
Wish you the best of luck.
You.
Thank you. Thank you, Wissam.
Welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be here with such a distinguished panel to talk about why brand is a strategic asset in finance. Having worked with Tony Blair to build a great investment banking brand, and having founded a venture capital firm that's focused on investing in brands, I have some perspective in this area. However, nowhere near the perspective of the leaders we have with us here today. This is the first time we've assembled a panel like this for a brand discussion at the Future Investment Initiative. We're delighted to be joined by Mohammed. Thank you. We also welcome David Haig, Chairman of Brand Finance, the world's leading brand valuation consultancy. And Greg Handrick, Managing Director of Lippincott EMEA, a leading brand consultancy. Let's get started. Mohammed, you are a leader brand that it is today. 2030.
Thank you, David and Greg, and of course Jackson. It's great to share this session with. Was 1971. One of the major objectives of the Vision 2030 is diversity, and since then we established all new sectors in Saudi, and we built $5 billion. And when we look at the brand that we inherited, introduced in terms of like the investments that we created, we wanted to have an agile brand and a smart brand and an advanced brand that will tell this kind of story to the external world. And a lot of people, they don't differentiate between the brand and the branding. The brand is everything. It's your story. It's everything. It's the meeting that you hold. It's the partnership you start. And it's the investment that you pursue. So everything around this E360, let's say the 360, the story of your activities, it's your brand. And it's the translation of your brand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Mohammed, what are the key pillars of PAF's brand strategy, and how have you
shaping the future of living and working, and you see it future of living and working, and you see it deployed in everything we are doing from a creative and deployed in everything we are doing from a creative and storytelling point of view with the science. Storytelling point of view with the science. Performance of our brand to make sure that we are on the right track in terms of our brand to make sure that we are on the right track in terms of
like sovereign wealth funds and assets.
And
like sovereign wealth funds and assets.
In the brand world, the currency of the brand is the brand world. The currency of the brand is the trust. Deploying more. The trust. Deploying more.
Great points. Greg, what are your thoughts? Points. Greg, what are your thoughts?
I'd say that up until now, historically, the JP Morgan. Now, historically, the JP Morgan. Honestly, you could operate a little bit rapidly. It represents what other people are saying. A little bit rapidly. It represents what other people are saying about you. And with the advent of AI, AI is picking up information from AI. AI is picking up information from relying on the power of a brand will be relying, whether that's from the brand itself or from investors, and going throughout not just your own asset.
Having publications. You've built the world's strong.
Refer to one of our markets in the world, and there are 43,000 companies. About 25 trillion of that is their brand values. Now, historically, as you were saying, many sectors didn't take and be of your stakeholders. Bad brand, good people won't work for you. If you've got a bad brand, and it is for 10 years, where we ask people's opinions of the brand equities. If a belief in the reputations of those brands, in general, and all has low opinions. And interestingly, the other side of that is in highly regulated markets where there are state-owned financial institutions, trust and reputation are much higher. It's in the sort of casino markets where reputations are lower. So they're very important and they generate a huge amount of return.
Thank you. Greg, you're also an expert on the merits of a strong brand. having advised world-leading companies such as Aramco, UBS, and Nokia. What would you like to add?
So I'll pick up on the notion of trust, because I agree. I mean, there was a statistic from the FCA that says barely 36% of people feel that financial institutions are honest or transparent with them. So this whole issue is indeed trust, and I think the word is largely misunderstood. If you go to any financial website, the word trust is going to be everywhere. Trust us, trust this, we're trusted. But you can't claim trust. You have to earn it. And I think this is the biggest mistake with the industry. Our research as well shows that in order to build trust, it's about a value equation. They would be saying the exact same thing, right? What I pay for, am I getting something in return that I feel is worthwhile? And when it's a no, the trust goes down. When it's an up, it goes in the right direction. And the key thing is to understand, well, what sits underneath this. Of course, performance and delivery and execution, all these things are critical. But the piece that's massively underestimated, particularly in this industry, is emotional connection. And you're going to go, surely not. It doesn't matter. I mean, I just want to know that it does well. But actually, the connection with a brand around whether it aligns with my values, around whether that brand actually cares and cares for me and trusts what I'm doing, is critical. And most don't actually pay attention to this. Again, a completely different category, but the same idea. In the airlines industry, low-cost airlines should all be about cost. Southwest Airlines in the US is famous for its low cost, but equally, its fun, jovial attitude, and it has a really loyal following. How does that translate? They lose just as many bags as anybody else, but they have 6 times less complaints. You take that same idea to the financial services, and therefore go, in good times and in bad, I will stick with brands that I trust. What does that really mean? It means brands that I feel align with my values. That is the most important thing. And what I've been impressed with PIF is it's basically saying, we're going to show you this now. So if the first 10, 15 years of this brand was all very hidden and below the radar, in the last few years, it's actually going to let us explain what we're doing, how we're making impact, how we're driving social opportunities and progress. And I think this is going to be the key for the industry, because if we don't start showing what we're doing and why, you combine that with AI and no sort of emotional interest, well, it's a beta-driven world. No one's going to stick to brands anymore. They're just going to go to ETFs.
Great points. Mohammed, you're an expert in this. Beyond trust, what other benefits does a powerful brand offer to financial leaders?
I believe if we take it from a holistic point of view, beyond trust, of course, accessibility. It's part of the value that you're going to gain whenever you have a trusted brand, that you're going to get more access to more people that you meet, more partners that you can work with, and of course, as an outcome, more opportunities that you can get, and more opportunities that you can operate with, and more opportunities that you can add to the business and connect different areas around the world. And maybe with the strong brand, the great thing that you will get as well, the strong network, that whenever you have the strong brand, everyone will start trying to speak with you, and it will allow you as well to speak with everyone. So this is the beyond value that whenever you have like a great brand and strong brand, that will allow you to maximize your value on all layers, that will maximize the value of your stakeholders as well, and everyone benefiting from your brand.
Thank you. Good thoughts. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, in preparation for speaking today, I was talking to one of my colleagues about what's the difference between trust and reputation. And she said to me, well, as far as I'm concerned, trust is you deliver what is expected of you from your stakeholders. So you say you'll do something and you deliver it. And your reputation is the ongoing long-term delivery of that statement of trust. So it comes down to the fundamentals. Do you actually do the fundamentals well? And I think one of the things that's often forgotten is that brands are not about advertising, they're not about marketing or promotion or communications. They are about getting all the fundamentals right first, and then the marketing really just amplifies that message. And certainly in my experience, PIF is extremely good at execution. It's extremely professional at doing what it does. And if you look at all the great financial service brands, they are great at what they do, they innovate, they are successful, and people begin to trust them that they will deliver that. And I know that Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway are not, they're not a sovereign wealth fund, they're not an asset manager in the conventional sense, but really they were an asset manager. And the thing about Berkshire Hathaway was everyone trusted them to deliver good returns year after year in the right way, and they did. And so they had a reputation and they had trust. And I think PIF is in a very similar position.
Thank you. Mohammed, coming back to you, in what ways do you think branding helps differentiate financial institutions in competitive markets?
I think if you look at most of the sovereign wealth funds and financial institutions, if you take the brand aspect outside of the story, they have financial sheets and different products, so they are all similar. What differentiates us in PIF is the approach that we decided to take, which is the storytelling and humanizing the brand of PIF. We try to give it a face. We try to give it like a human facing that will allow everyone to engage from all layers of our stakeholder. And this is exactly what differentiates PIF from all other sovereign wealth fund. And as my dear friend Greg was highlighting, that we took the approach as well. It's not about just telling what we are doing, but educate the people about why we are doing this. And we're trying to tell them about the value that will be reflected on all stakeholders, from the what's in it for me as a person walking on the street, or what's in it for me for an employee under PIF, or what's in it for me as a partner working with PIF.
Thank you. Branding is vital to differentiating financial institutions, but as David said, another key component is reputation. Greg, why do you think reputation is particularly crucial in the financial industry?
I think that, it's a sobering thought, but I think that average is over. I think that AI is inevitably going to mean one of two things. On the one side, it means everybody now has access to AI-driven solutions. You can now have a logo, a website, a messaging. You can accelerate your social media feed, all using AI, which means that anybody from a pet shop to an ice cream parlor can just create this overnight. So suddenly everyone's upping their game. But of course, AI is feeding off itself, which means that everything is going to start to look and feel the same as well. And so the other part of the argument says, if everyone now starts to look and feel the same, but I can ask ChatGPT, I need to find an asset manager that's delivering this with this, that, and the other, it's going to give me the answer. In other words, it's going to cut through, and only excellence, genuine, true excellence, in the way that Syed explained, i.e. delivery, execution, customer experience, product, those are the ones that are going to stand through. So I think reputation's changing from, yes, I'm solid, I'm a name that you can trust, through to everyone looks the same, and only those who genuinely are excellent in everything they do will cut through. And so I think the world is going to change dramatically. Today, I'm going to be interested to hear, from a brand valuation perspective, this space is filled with brands, and my guess is they're all kind of much of a likeness. I think over the next 10 years, it's going to dramatically change, with a couple of very big winners and a lot of big losers.
Good thoughts. David, let's get your perspective on branding and growth. How does branding support long-term growth for financial entities?
If I may, I'd just like to comment on trust first. I know I talked about it a minute ago. The thing about financial services is it's the biggest industry in the world by far, if you look at all its aspects, and it covers the most important things in people's lives, both personally and corporately. It is exceptionally important to everyone. And trust that financial institutions will deliver is central to people's lives and to the success of companies and even the success of governments. So nothing is more important than believing you can actually trust in a brand. Will they pay the insurance claim? Will they give me a good return? Will they not go bust? So financial services needs brands more than anything else. And I think there are standout brands in financial services that really do that. And that really answers your question. If there are brands that stand out as delivering, people will come to them and they will stay with them. And therefore they will give them their work, they will refer them. It's a virtuous circle. More and more comes to those brands if they can be trusted. So it's very important to long-term growth.
Thank you. Mohammed, how does a strong brand contribute to resilience amid market fluctuations?
So again, whenever there's a time for changes or challenges that, or cycles or market cycles, people, they tend to work with the brands that they have the history of trust and credibility and track record of achieving things. And again, going back to the point that how can the brand reflect all your activities from an investment point of view to explain everything and to give this kind of track record that will give this kind of trust for everyone is understanding your story and knowing what you are doing. So whenever there's the time of the cycle is changing, that will trust that I can keep going forward with dealing with this brand on all level. And it will give you an access on different levels. It's not only on the level of just finishing an investment, but as well dealing with your people internally in your organization for them to trust that this brand that I can trust to stay during this time of change with this brand, or the people that you work with, the vendors, the contractors, etc., etc.
Great points. Thank you. Greg, one more for you. What role does branding play in maintaining investor loyalty?
I mean, it's a similar question to what you just asked Sayed. It's like, how do you keep going and stay through thick and thin? Probably communication, honestly. And I don't mean communication in advertising. I mean being open and transparent around what you're doing, why you're doing it, when things have gone wrong, why, what is it that you're trying to do. It's an interesting piece of research we did where you could track people who really understood the PIF brand, understood what it was trying to achieve, and then those markets where they didn't understand. And the correlation is enormous. The more you understand it, the better the strength of the brand, the less you understand it. And that seems rational. But actually, if you think about the industry as a whole, it's not an industry that talks a lot about itself. It's an industry that, by definition, kind of stays under the radar, covers up a little bit what it's doing, and kind of glosses over and will just do returns. But actually, I'd argue it's the opposite. I think we need to be explaining a lot more. It reminds me of the private equity space. I did an analysis where we're looking at every single private equity firm there, and I probably missed a few, but all of them bar one, Sequoia, basically on their homepage only talks about themselves. That's it. They only talk about themselves. They're not actually explaining what they're doing, but they're a private equity firm that's investing in operating companies. So when we worked with Advent, we said, this is the trick. We've got to change this. So on your homepage, we want you to talk about your operating companies. So if you want to keep investors coming, I think you've got to flip the narrative. You've got to talk about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and you've got to focus on what it is that you're adding value and stop talking just about yourselves in glossy terms.
Thank you. We're running short on time. One more question, Mohammed. I'm a huge sports fan, so I have to ask this. You have led PIF's amazing collaboration with FIFA for the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup and relationships with both the ATP and WTA, positioning Saudi Arabia at the forefront of sports. So, would love to hear about your sports investment strategy and how it contributes to your tremendous brand and for brand value in finance.
So maybe we can speak about just one vertical, which is our sponsorship strategy and why sport specifically is important for PIF, but we can speak for hours about sport. First of all, I don't think nothing better than sport to tell your story and to be used as a platform to communicate with your target audience. It's a global language. Everyone understands sport. And from an economic point of view, it makes 100% sense for all investments focus on. At the moment, sport represents 1% of the total GDP, and if you take it on our region, it represents 2% of the total GDP. The market of sport at the moment is $450 billion, and expected by 2030 to touch $650 billion, and by 2032 to touch on $850 billion. So it's one of the most fastest growing industries around the world. And if you add and you double click on the sport, if you go down on the level of the technology on sport and the gaming in sport, it's higher and higher in terms of the return. So from an investment point of view, it makes 100% sense. Now, if we look at our sponsorship strategy, it's not about just having our logo there. Everything we are doing in our sponsor strategy, it reflects 4 main pillars. So we have the inclusivity, we have the technology, how we work with the young generation and the grassroots to be part of the story, and how to make everything sustainable. If any sport that we are targeting is touching on these 4 pillars, definitely it's a target for PIF, and every example you mentioned, from the ATP to the WTA to the golf and E360 and the FIFA, definitely they touch on these four pillars. But again, I know that we are running out of time, so we can have another session just to tell our sponsorship strategy.
Wonderful, thank you. Extremely valuable insight from everyone here today. Thank you so much. I'd like to ask, I know we're out of time, I'd like to ask you each to take 30 seconds and add some final thoughts, if that's okay?
On the spot?
No, generally, on the topic.
Generally on the topic, I think that branding has gone from being something that was in the shadows to actually being pivotal in a way that most people don't realize because of the pressure of AI. So I genuinely think a brand is going to give you the strength to control the narrative, and if you don't, you're going to get left behind.
Well, I would say that to be best, to be a valuable brand, you have to be good at everything and you have to be best at what you actually do. But occasionally you're not. Sometimes you fall off what you should be doing for one reason or another. There are market fluctuations. Sometimes there are all sorts of different reasons why brands have a problem. The thing is, if you have a very strong brand, it will take you through the difficult times. So, there are many brands we can think of in financial services that have had quite serious problems over the last 10 years, but they recover when they have good brands. That is why it is worth investing as much money as you can to get that goodwill in people's brains, because they will forgive you a short-term blip and you carry on rising. Whereas if you don't have a strong brand, you won't.
Final word?
I think 2 things. First of all, we are proud that the studies that we ran with Brand Finance or with Lippincott, it shows that we are on the right track. We are the fastest growing financial brand around the world, but it gives us as well a lot of responsibility that we need to give more work and more activities that will allow us to keep on the right track. This is number 1. Number 2, maybe I will just end by, if you look at all your fixed assets under any company, most of them, they depreciate over time. The good brand is the only asset that will appreciate over time. So I think with understanding this, whenever you are building your strategy, it will give you another angle of how you're going to build your strategy and how you're going to execute it.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time and insights. That concludes our panel. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackson.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to try and speak up because I know there's a fair amount of volume out there. Japan's creative economy has become one of its most powerful exports, with manga and anime leading a global wave of cultural investment. In 2023, overseas sales of Japanese content reached nearly 6 trillion yen, with a target of 20 trillion yen by 2033, a sign both of ambition and confidence in the creativity as an engine of growth. Tokyo sits at the heart of this transformation, not just as the cultural capital of Japan, but as a global hub where art, technology, and commerce converge. Today, we're going to briefly explore how Tokyo can build on its storytelling heritage to attract new investments, new audiences, and new partnerships, while remaining true to the authenticity that made its culture iconic. We have two fantastic speakers today. We have Her Excellency Yoriko Koike, Governor of Tokyo, and Yoichi Takahashi, a manga artist. Please do join me on stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. So, Her Excellency, I'd like to start with you, if I may. Japan's killer content, manga and anime, is also highly attractive as an investment target.
Right.
How is the Tokyo Metropolitan Government advancing the development and promotion of the appeal of the content industry, including manga and anime?
As you mentioned before, the content industry has grown into a global market worth $900 billion and attracting significant attention as a major growth sector. And within this vast marketplace, the key challenge now lies in how effectively Japan can elevate its international presence and take the lead. And needless to say, the key to works like Captain Tsubasa lies in the essential appeal of manga and anime, and to harness their worldwide popularity and drive their growth, Tokyo will take the lead in expanding the market, attracting investments, and delivering new value to the world. In Tokyo, we host the annual Anime Award Festival, and this iconic international event, which draws almost 1,000 entries, yes,
wow,
from ambitious creators around the world. And it is a flagship international competition for Japan, and it also serves as a powerful platform to showcase Tokyo's immense potential and creativity on the global stage. And furthermore, in just 2 days, we will establish in Tokyo to support these efforts. This facility will empower animators and manga creators by providing them with practical support, such as refining their production skills, preparing them for entrepreneurship, and allowing them to gain the know-how required to secure funding. By making Tokyo the ultimate place for creators aiming to shine on the global stage, and we will unlock the earning potential of the content industry and enhance the city's competitiveness. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So it's about the how do you take the creativity and make it commercial, make it investable. But Mr. Takahashi, if I could, the manga Captain Tsubasa is beloved worldwide, I understand, and it enjoys immense popularity here in the Middle East under the title Captain Majid. Could you share with us the secret behind its universal appeal across not just countries but generations, and how it's led to the business opportunities that the governor speaks of? And we have examples here in the back.
はい、サッカーという世界で愛されているスポーツを題材にした
漫画だったりアニメがあるので、それが多分皆さんに分かりやすく中東の方々にもでも人気があるサッカーというスポーツが大事だというのが一つ大きかったことだと思いますし、主人公のキャプテン翼君という主人公のキャラクターが、自分の大きな夢に向かって世界一のサッカー選手になりたいとか、日本をワールドカップで優勝させたいとかっていう大きな夢を持って頑張る姿を、描こうと思って描き始めた、その主題を一貫して、漫画の中で表現しようと思っていたので、その、テーマ自体も世界中の子どもたちに受け入れられたんじゃないかと思います。
First of all, I'd like to answer the first question, like why Captain Tsubasa could attract so much popularity worldwide through the generation and nations. I think the key factor was it was all about football, which is the sports beloved by all over the nation, globally, and it's all across the generation and nations. And also, the theme of the work was the children striving towards realization their dream. For example, Tsubasa-kun wanted to be the world number footballer, or he likes to be the champion in the world championship. So, yes, that was perhaps the two factors that it could attract the borderless audience.
あとビジネスということではキャプテン翼のキャラクターたちの、T シャツだったりフィギュアだったり、いろんなキャラクターグッズを展開したりとか、あと、サッカークラブとのコラボレーション、世界にはいろんな有名なサッカークラブがあったり、国を代表するナショナルチームもあります、そういうチームとのコラボレーションなどもこれまでも行ってきました。
And to answer the second question, that business opportunity or what we have achieved through the work was beyond the animated adaptation of the original work of manga. We have seen the success in various ventures derived from the work, including the games or the merchandising to make a product by using IP, or the collaboration with the football team or the national teams. And I am grateful that comes from the big love for the characters in the story.
So I hear very much it's the attraction of football, and it's about achieving one's potential and one's heights. Thank you for that. I think that is universal, as you say. Governor Koike, let me come back to you. Among overseas visitors to Japan, so-called, as it were, holy site pilgrimages to locations associated with anime are gaining attention. Sales of merchandise, as Mr. Takahashi just mentioned, related to manga and anime characters are also very, very strong. And it demonstrates the global recognition of Japanese manga and anime. Please share your thoughts on how Tokyo plans to leverage and integrate manga and anime to promote tourism.
Oh yes, Japanese anime and manga are very popular all over the world, and they are one of the key attractions to inspire overseas travelers to experience Japan. And Tokyo is actively utilizing anime and manga as tourism resources. And we are working to promote the tourism industry through these efforts. For instance, the Ikebukuro district in Tokyo became a sort of landmark, and you mentioned that the holy place and a hub for anime culture where it attracts fans from all over the world. And the area is home to see world's largest anime shop, ranking recognized by Guinness World Records. Can you imagine? And Ikebukuro also features a large number of collaboration with anime films, especially stores offering characters-inspired fashion and themed cafe-style cafes. And the entire district has a lively atmosphere centered on anime. And Ikebukuro as well, we have also estimated Anime Tokyo Station, a hub for promoting Japanese anime. And this venue offers exhibition of popular works and displays of valuable materials such as animation cells. And visitors can immerse themselves in the world of anime there. So far, it has attracted more than 220,000 visitors. And additionally, we have launched stamp rallies in collaboration with the popular anime series creators. And the events encourage tourists to explore attractions like statues and manhole cover. Can you imagine a manhole? Featuring iconic anime characters. By doing so, we enhance the experience for anime fans while generating economic benefits for local communities. And through these initiatives, we are trying to connect the various anime locations located across different parts of Tokyo. And the goal is to transform the entire city into a dynamic center of anime tourism. And we warmly invite all of you here and all of you to visit Tokyo and experience the vibrant and diverse charm of this dynamic city for yourselves.
Next time I'm in Tokyo, I will come visit.
Yes, please. I will guide you.
Mr. Takahashi, just a final quick question, if I might. I imagine that the Captain Tsubasa series is irreplaceable for you, incredibly important. What are the keys to nurturing a work, and what do you prioritize when collaborating with overseas partners? And finally, if you could close for us with one message for young manga artists and creators.
大変長い、ストーリーなので、その中でキャラクターたち一人一人が言動だったり感情だったりがぶれないように、一人一人のキャラクターを把握するのがすごい大事なのと、やっぱり作品に対する熱というかパッションを込めて書かないと読者にも通じないと思っているので、毎回毎回その情熱を、紙にぶつけるようにしています。
To answer the first question, so what was the key factor of nurturing the work? Because it's been like a very long-standing work, it had to be very consistent. I actually insist the consistency on the characters, the way that they move, the way that speak, the words they use, and also, more importantly, to pour passion and love into every single characters, even though that number of characters grow over the years, but I do love and then put as much as I can into the characters.
あと長いストーリーなので、マンネリになってしまうといけないということで、毎回毎回新しい何かを、新しい驚きを読者に伝えようとしています。
And also, I'm trying to take the new essence every time because it is a long story, as I said. So, in order not to bore the audience, I'm trying to get the inspiration of the new ideas.
あと海外のパートナーと組むに際しても、やっぱりさっき言ったみたいに情熱というか、海外のパートナーの方もちゃんとキャプテン翼という作品を理解してくれて、愛を持って接してくれる方とビジネスするとやっぱり非常にうまくいくと思いますし、ただなんとなく上辺だけで人気があるからということで、関わりを持つとちょっと大やけどしてしまうというか、なかなかうまくいかなかったりということもありました。なので相手の方がキャプテン翼という作品自体を理解してくれている、そこが一番大事だと思います。
To second question, what's important to work with overseas partners. Again, I'm looking into the passion and the love for my work because we have to be aligned in terms of loving the work. So yes, we had a situation like, if somebody just approaches us saying we like it, more like superficially way because of the business sense. But I just have to be sure that the person that I work with has the same amount of the passion and the love into my work so that we can have that long-lasting relationship.
Mr. Takahashi, I think that's a wonderful place to finish with the idea of passion and love for your work, and would we all have the same? Would you all join me, please, in thanking Mr. Takahashi and Governor Koike, apologies, for joining us, and sorry it was such a short conversation.
Born in Tokyo and raised in Tokyo and work in Tokyo for,
well, thank
everyone
you.
in the world.
Thank you so
very
much. Thank you all.
Okay. Good. No, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here, and particularly with the panelists that we have here from around the world joining us. The topic today is about private equity and whether it's moved beyond buyouts, and I'm privileged here to have an esteemed group of panelists with me. I'll start with the ladies first, Huda Lawati, who is the founder and CEO of Aleph Capital. Patrick Healy right next to her, who is the CEO of Hellman & Friedman. Andrea Ponti, who's right next to me, a founder and managing partner of GHO Capital. Mustafa Siddiqui, right in the middle, who is the founder and CEO of SQ Capital. And last but not least, our first-time visitor for the region, Tong Goi, who is the chairman and CEO of China's second biggest insurance company. So it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. The title of private equity is getting a lot of popularity, both in this region and frankly globally for the longest time. And what we're seeing is there's a trend that's evolving in private equity where we're seeing a sort of, if you want, a tale of two cities. On one hand, you have funds that have grown larger and larger than ever before, over 100 billion, 200 billion, 300 billion, trillions in size, and they have a whole horde of different things underneath the overall portfolio, like the Blackstones of this world that have an infrastructure fund, a private equity fund, a credit fund, growth funds, and what have you, technology funds. So there's a whole horde of those. And then at the same time, we're seeing some private equity firms that have gone a little bit more specialized and have really grown through that specialty. And so here we're kind of discussing, kind of unpacking a little bit of all of that, as well as where AI is taking us and where this region has gone. But one of the thematics that we're seeing is that private equity seems to have peaked in 2001, where sort of the thematic around easy money and how easy it is to get the beta and how easy it is for people to perform when credit was available and a lot of funding was there and it was easy exits, et cetera. We're now in a different era. From 2003, we're seeing that more and more of the private equity firms are not getting as much exits. Maybe we're 60% below where you used to be on exits and on value creation, 63% below historics as well. So we're seeing a new evolution in where private equity is heading. And so there's no one better than to unpack all of this with the panelists that I have with me. And in particular, I mean, I'd like to start with you, Mustafa, because you in particular have yourself moved beyond the buyout. You spent many years with Blackstone, and now you set up your own fund, focusing more on secondaries, which seems to be a thematic. So we're seeing a lot more secondaries happening in the overall market than ever before as a form of exit, perhaps. But we'd love to hear your perspectives about where you see private equity in general and yourself in your own setup.
Sure, thank you. I think I've had the privilege of a journey that's been very interesting, as you said, starting off in traditional private equity, first growth equity and then buyouts, and then for the last many years in GP stakes, which actually first brought me into the secondaries world, but also for the first time made me a student of the industry. The industry I'd grown up in without really paying attention to it qua industry. And so I think one of the observations I would make is that finance is probably the most Darwinian industry there is, right? If you're not evolving, you're getting left behind. Assuming that you're going to achieve outsized success doing what the prior generation did is a recipe for mediocrity. Yeah. And so one of the observations that I had was that private equity was maturing as an industry. Today, there's something like $6 trillion of private equity assets under management, close to $10 trillion of total private markets assets under management. And there's a whole ecosystem that is developing around that and needs to develop around that. And so then if you think about the liquidity side of the equation, literally only 2% of that private equity installed base turns over today in the secondary market. That is the total size of the secondary market, the total liquidity available on, again, an ordinary course basis. Compare that to roughly 90% of the public equity market turns over every year. So I think that need for liquidity outside of the normal channels is really important. And then the immaturity of this space, and there are several other spaces around the ecosystem like that as well. But just put it in perspective, the 2% stat is an interesting one. When you think about the buyout space, there are roughly close to 2,000 middle market private equity firms. Our firm is focused on middle market secondaries. I can literally count on less than 2 hands the number of true middle market secondaries firms, which is mind-boggling, right? Yeah. The development to come in this space, in other pockets around private equity, I think there's lots of huge opportunities there. Oh, and lots of, I think, the big firms and small firms are seeing that and gravitating towards that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're seeing more of those trends. And Andrea, maybe I'll turn over to you. And GHO is very much of a sort of focused fund as well. You've been doing that for a whole number of years as well. How are you finding the trends, and how are you looking at your own growth and development in that context?
So we started 10 years ago, more or less, very much focused only on healthcare and very much focused on the middle market in Europe. We've grown outside of Europe We focus on transatlantic growth for European companies that want to go to the US, and for US companies that want to go to Europe. That's a fantastic value inflection point. And I think that we found a very rich seam to mine in terms of transactions. That means that we don't really have to grow that much bigger and diversify. On the other hand, we see lots of very interesting opportunities to put capital to work within the healthcare ecosystem that we operate in. And that could be structured capital, it could be growth capital, it could be minorities instead of buyouts. And so I think we see a very rich future in growing within our specialty. And I think that we can continue as a result of being very focused and very disciplined to deliver very, very good returns for investors and not have to dilute them with big size and lots of different activities.
Well, that certainly seems to be more of a trend now. And perhaps, Tung, I'll turn over to you. You're managing about $30 million, let's say, of assets, and you've been a big funder and investor as an LP in many of these large private equity firms. And I'd love to understand better your perspectives as to whether you do more to the same people because they're now very diversified, or do you look at more specialty in how you allocate?
I think from our perspective at the moment, because we invest quite a bit in alternative, given our insurance background is an insurance company, our liability is very long tail, so that matches, private long-term assets matches our liability. So I think it's natural habitat for us to park our capital into the long-term private assets. So we do private equity, we do credit as well, the infrastructure, the three major asset classes. I think from our perspective, I think the key criteria for us is to look for the best available managers within each of the asset class. And the criteria we apply probably, I think, is everybody does the same, but we look for stability of the team, we look for track record, and also look for the potential proper alignment of interest. So normally we pick the managers very, very discreetly, I suppose. In terms of whether you're going to go for a manager with a like a supermarket type, with a shelf of a lot of products, or the specialized fund, I think we are pretty agnostic, right? Even as a private equity, we look for the team, for the business, for the product. If that product produces long-term outsized returns, or definitely we go for it. And in addition to that, having said that, I think we also be very cognizant of the trends like AI, like healthcare. And AI healthcare probably now is in terms of sectors, one of the two major sectors we're very focused on, trying to build our presence in these sectors. Obviously, these we think we're going to have impact our future, impact our investment universe is going to be very, very meaningfully. So that's why we also focus, apart from sort of the generalist names, we also focus on AI as well. So I mean high tech as well as healthcare. Yeah, I think that's how we have a sort of trying to build a depth as well as a width of the platform.
Well, you raised something that brings me to my next sort of section of where I'd like to turn this conversation to, which is AI. And Patrick, maybe I'll start with you specifically. I mean, we've seen the thematics across, and we've heard about this morning in some of the panels earlier on, in terms of where AI is taking us, technology, the evolution of technology, and what that might entail for us for the future. And within your own portfolio companies, surely technology has been disruptive to some of it. And how have you looked at how you manage your own portfolio companies to make sure that you get the best out of your investments with regard to technology specifically?
Thank you, and thank you, Richard, and the folks from FII for having us all here. It's a significantly wonderful event. So we only have 30 companies. It's about $350 billion in market cap enterprise value, about 250,000 employees, $100 billion in revenue, and about $150 billion of our own capital, which is our own capital, about $20 billion of our own partner capital and third-party capital invested. So that's sort of the setup, and I would say 40% of what we do is software, but 100% of what we do is technology. Might be financial services, might be information services, so technology runs through it all. And that's like the key thing for us. You know, AI is, and digital has been sort of part of our mainstream. We did, you know, print media, we did digital media. We've been having to ride these transitions. This is obviously very disruptive, but also quite powerful. So for us, AI is strategic. We've taken 2 partners that are on the investing side of our business. We've initiated 2.5 years ago them to be full-time on AI. We have about 10 people internally just focused on AI. Today in San Francisco, we've got 100 of our portfolio company executives, you know, focused on the best and the latest and the greatest. And the reason is because for sure we need to be defensive about the businesses we own. Think about we own the largest contact or call center software business in the world. If you think about one industry that might be disrupted, it's that industry. So we need to be ahead of it. So we're sort of viewing AI as offensive, and we want to lean into it to help sort of fund our growth. So we've got lots of examples of efficiencies being gained by reducing costs. And Virgin Atlantic, I think now 40% of their calls, we power their call centers, are now, you know, answered by agentic agents as opposed to, you know, human capital. So that's freeing up capital, and it's allowing us to reinvest into the products. We've got lots of sort of different examples along that way. So it's very, very strategic. I'd sort of say from the investment perspective, there's a lot of industries and businesses which are sort of in a bad neighborhood from a valuation perspective because the world or the markets can't ascertain what the future might be. And so, you know, customer care would be an area where valuations have come down significantly because of the uncertainty. So that's sort of interesting because, you know, sort of our experience is enterprise wants to buy from enterprise as it relates to some of these bigger businesses. So strategic priority for the firm, you know, sort of from the top down.
Great. No, absolutely. And Huda, maybe turning over to you. You've been an investor for a few decades now, but you're now particularly focused on really looking at technology and AI and how that can transform traditional businesses, particularly in this part of the world. I'd love to hear more from you about that journey and how you're seeing it, and how much have you seen adaptation? Do companies actually adopt technology proactively, and how's that working?
Great question. So it's interesting. I started my business 4 years ago, and the idea was investing in mid-market in the GCC, and we singled out digital transformation as one of the value-add levers. We're not going to not do the other things, but this needed to be singled out because it needed dedicated focus, because the return on technology, the need of technology for sustainability, and the power of disruption were very integral to our future and the future of the businesses we invest in. And within that 4 years, AI came in, and it made it even more relevant. We see it in 3 areas. One is how we operate as a manager. We're a small company. I don't have an in-house GC. Things as simple as, am I compliant with the LPA? Can I do this? Speeding up my analysis, supporting my analysts and associates to become thinkers as opposed to just, helping hands. AI has been immensely helpful, so long as they understand the downside and the hallucination risks and all of that. It's important from a diligence perspective because we can assess, is this industry, are we going to look at a call center business today or not? Are we going to do a business that is focused on people doing data mining or not? Because those businesses can become irrelevant. But the third and most impactful one is how we apply it within our portfolio companies. I'll just list a few examples of what we've done in some of our businesses to give you an idea. And I think the opportunity, given the scale we operate at as an industry, must be massive. But AI-enabled development, we have reduced in the pet shop, which is an omni-channel pet business, by 25% using AI-powered coding assistance. We implemented a tool for warehouse management system, SlimStock, and the vendor there has started using AI, which is helping us plan inventory allocation between warehouses and shops live. Sanipex is a business that's been around for 30 years. We've done multiple collections of these luxury lifestyle products, and we got Microsoft in to help us. Well, we want to benefit from our history. We're in the process of putting a local language model that will look at historical brands, historical connection, historical clients, to see how they moved and pull out from our own, intelligence from our own data that we can use for our future. Customer, obviously, the generative AI for marketing, visuals, coding, the machine learning, we're looking at customer trends, predicting churn risk, all of that we've done in the last 18 months. We also allocate, as part of our diligence, budgets and timelines for our tech roadmap very deliberately, because if you don't do that, it just comes as an additional cost. And we have reduced so much time, because one of the big projects we had in one of our businesses was data cataloging to be able to benefit from that. AI, of course, operates in chaos. So that's short. Obviously, you need some structure, so we still need to do some of it, but the timeline is reduced, the cost is reduced, so it's very impactful. But we need to play the role of making sure our portfolio companies do this. We do that, I do that as a board member in other companies, but I think that's where a lot of the challenges.
I think for sure, as a portfolio manager, there's a lot of focus and attention that needs to be done on that. And perhaps, Andrea, turning it over to you, how do you see that as an investor, manager of your own assets, and when you see technology, particularly in healthcare, taking us leapfrogging ahead, how do you see that industry being challenged by it?
So I think, like everything, change is both an opportunity and a challenge. I think in healthcare, there is a huge amount of data. In fact, I can't, maybe insurance has more data, but healthcare, there's, between the hospitals, the clinical trials, all of the regulatory information that is available about patients, about products, etc. There's an enormous amount of data that's available. One of the challenges for healthcare is actually to standardize that data, clean it, and make it usable, because I think AI is one of those garbage in, garbage out type things. If the data isn't right, then the answer is going to be wrong by definition. And so we're working quite a lot with all of our portfolio companies to make sure that the data is there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ownership of the data is a big issue, because there's a lot of people who have patient data that never asked the patients, because 10 years ago it was never really relevant to ask anybody, can I please use all of your patient data? Now we've made a lot of progress on that. So I think that there's a lot that is happening, and there's a huge opportunity to improve and make efficiencies, reduce cost. The pharmaceutical companies have all invested heavily in it. The thing that I find, we've got a company that has some AI products that help the pharmaceutical companies become more efficient. When you go and explain that to the pharmaceutical companies, you have to go to the person who's heading the department that's going to become more efficient by streamlining and reducing their employment by 90%. For some reason, they don't want to do that. They see their budget as a percentage of the total budget as a measure of their importance, and therefore reducing their budget by 90% isn't something that they want to do. So there's a real challenge amongst the large pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, to actually bring all of these things in.
Well, it's a brand new world that we're in, and we're going to see a lot more of those challenges. But I'd like to, Mustafa, over to you. It's interesting because we're talking about how panelists are looking at AI vis-a-vis their portfolio companies or their strategies, but you've actually now changed into setting up your own company, if you would call it a PE 2.0, right? So you're entering it afresh in your own setup.
Yes.
How are you using technology? How are you adopting on technology and AI for you to do what you're doing currently?
Well, it's funny, when we launched the firm back in January, we used the adjective the first AI native secondaries firm. And because we say this, and we really mean it when we say this, that our single biggest advantage as a secondaries firm in the age of AI has been that we're a brand new firm. And the opportunity to take a blank sheet of paper without, in a sense, if you think about the incumbent challenge, with no disrespect to the incumbents, right? It's that you've got an existing factory floor. You've got to stop the factory floor, change out some of the equipment, rewire the process, retrain the people. And that's inevitably a challenge. It's surmountable, but it's a challenge. It costs money, it takes time. For us, we really had the opportunity to take a blank sheet of paper and say, okay, what would a dream secondaries investment process look like? What are all the ways in which technology can be your ally here, and 2025 vintage technology, at a time when the rate of obsolescence is so high, right? Solutions rolled out in 2023 are obsolete today. And we were fortunate we were able to attract a really world-class data science and AI team from Tiger Global and Lightspeed Ventures So we had the right people to ideate around this and then to
Yeah.
implement this. So that was literally has been probably the funnest part of this journey. There were moments where you almost fall out of your chair because you're sitting there daring to dream. Say, hold on a second, can we do that? Yeah, of course we can. Really? Right? And so, so what we've done is we've basically built an AI throughout our investment process, from capturing data. And remember, why is it so important in secondaries? Because secondaries is a very kind of high volume, high throughput strategy. So on the one hand, we bill ourselves as fundamental investors in secondaries, which in itself is unusual. But on the other hand, if you're going to be a fundamentals-based investor in a high throughput, high volume strategy, you need to somehow arm yourself with speed.
Yeah.
And so that's where the data science, the AI come in, allows us to move faster. To bring it to life, and this is probably the easiest of all the things we're doing, but it's the easiest also to articulate. We walk into a data room, an LP secondary data room, which has, let's say, I don't know, 30 funds and 100 PDF and Excel files, 100,000 data points across those files. We can ingest all that data in less than 90 minutes into our database in the form that our team wants to see it in, so we can immediately start running our analyses and get straight to the underwriting instead of dealing with manipulation of data.
Yeah, it's amazing
It's
to
incredibly
watch.
powerful.
It's
that
amazing.
would take weeks for the typical
No,
incumbent.
absolutely. Well, thank you for that. It's amazing to watch. I can't help but bring this back now to the Middle East. So we have been used to historically seeing the Middle East being a destination for fundraising, and now we're seeing the Middle East becoming a destination for investing. Tung, maybe I'd like to start with you. This is your first trip again, but we'd love to see what are your perspectives to begin with? What would it take, and how are you looking at this region? Could it become a destination for your own investments as well?
Well, I think, it's actually my first trip to Middle East, and Riyadh is the first destination. And, for me, it strikes me as a first impression is there's quite a bit of a traffic jam when you travel. So that means there's a lot of activities. And also, second impression is the population is amazingly young. There's a lot of young people and full of energy. So that also, Saudi has quite a bit of reserve, I suppose. So it's all very good recipe for a huge, strong growth in the future if you get it right. I think that's why we're here. I'm trying to know the people, know the country, and know the region, and trying to see whether there will be any opportunities for us to invest, to be partnered with, I think. Yeah.
Well, welcome to having you here a lot more and coming in and
we'll
hopefully
convince
see
you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Patrick, perhaps over to you. You've had a lot of partners from this region. You've had LPs from this region. They've been quite loyal in terms of looking at some of your investments and what you're doing. They've been co-investors with you. How are you seeing the evolution here, and what are you looking for in terms of potentially, eventually getting you to start investing over here?
Yeah, so we our first institutional partnership was in 1987.
Wow.
We're now on our 11th partnership, which we closed last year. That first partnership was very much a buy and sell mentality, but starting in 1992, we sort of moved away from it's not about the deal, but it's about the business. So we've been an investment firm that whole period, and then over the last 15 years, we sort of have conjoined that with this notion of a long-term ownership mentality. So about half of the 140 billion of equity that we have in the firm has been invested for 11 years or longer. And if I go back all the way to 1987, we had actually a Saudi family as our first outside investor in that fund from the region, and then we've grown with the region since then, I think, as the region has grown in its appreciation and understanding of the asset class. And I almost think of where we're going and where the industry for private equity is going and private markets. It's almost like it's a great relationship, it's a great spouse, it's a great marriage, it's long-term, it's smart. We learn a lot by talking to people in the region, and over time it's only gotten smarter. It's patient. That's not always easy to say in a relationship. Yeah. It can be challenging. It doesn't let you off the hook easy. So, and it's flexible. So as I think about, where private markets are going when, private and public start to merge and there's less of a definition, and certainly where we're going to own things longer, the flexibility to scale up, the flexibility to be strategic, not necessarily having the need to fund near-term liabilities, but compound capital over the long term. It's very, very aligned with where the industry and where we as a firm are going.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Huda, would love to get your perspective on how you've seen the region evolve. I mean, over the past, let's say, decade or so, in terms of asset management as a general asset class as a destination.
Yeah, I mean, 2 decades. But listening to everyone here and all the different new products and ways of doing things, and we're barely scratching the surface. We have the benefit, of course, of leapfrogging. But I think when we started in the 2000s, we used to spend our time telling people, well, this is what private equity is, and this is what it means. I remember I went with some of the fundraising teams and to an investor in Saudi, and he said, yes, I know your bank, I have some money with you. And I'm like, no, that's not what we do. So it's come a long way. I think we had a growth phase in the early 2000s, a lot of investments were made. Then after the financial crisis, there was a lull. A lot of people were talking private equity doesn't work in the Middle East, we haven't seen returns, we haven't seen exits. In the last 5 years, we've seen so many funds come up locally, internationally, and interestingly, a lot of the international PE firms that have come here, they've come after assets that we were doing in the 2000s. Those assets have come to this space because they had a private equity investor early on in their history. And I think it just means that the private equity investment cycle was longer because we were learning. And today, with the education curve, with the opening up, with the globalization, we have a lot of tools at our hand. There's a lot to do. I've seen, since we've set up the deal flow, the capital markets, the strategics becoming acquisitive, a lot of corporates are looking at inorganic. That's helping us. Secondaries are becoming a thing. So I think there's a lot to go. We're really just scratching the surface, and I'm very, very excited. And I don't think I think the last 2 years, just the last 2 years, are probably equivalent to the 18 years that preceded.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to leave with one last question for each and one of you to quickly answer before we wrap up. If I'm to go forward 10 years from now, where do you see your market, relatively speaking? Are you more nervous or are you more excited about where the world is heading? Patrick, I'll start with you and maybe we'll work our way backwards.
No, I think for sure more excited because I think the opportunity to own things longer, compound things longer in the private markets, it's a better governance model. And I think it's, that's the way the world's going. And, I look at what the Kingdom did with Scopely and EA, like that, they can do that. Hopefully we could do something like that in the future, highly strategic, own something for long term. And I think that's where the world's going for private markets. It's exciting.
Huda?
Yeah, I'm definitely extremely excited, and I think for us as a region, we will see all these sort of different types of business models come in here, and I think we're going to have our own private equity model.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. I feel like we're sitting here in the early innings of what is the next big growth area in private markets.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, it's going to be multiples bigger than it is
Well,
today.
let me turn it a little bit different. What makes you most nervous? And we'll finish with what makes you most nervous for the rest of the...
Sure, okay. All right, so I get the hard one. So, look, I think there's a shakeout coming in the private equity industry. I think there's going to be a pretty wide dispersion of outcomes for private equity firms over the next few years. I think this idea that, it's hard to exit is a bit of a fig leaf because it's easy. It's still good businesses at decent prices are still eminently exitable, eminently saleable, especially in the middle market where you're not dependent on IPO markets.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's a bit of a shakeout coming, and so I think you need to be able to do your homework, pick the right, pick the right funds, pick the right GPs, pick the right assets, and so that's how we've tried to design our firm.
Well, I fully agree with you. 20 years ago, we believed that private is the way to go. But today, still in the future, I think private assets are still the way to go. And keep on dreaming, but you need to get your feet solid on the ground.
Yeah.
Do the good work. Then you will get rewarded, I think. Yeah.
That's great. And excited and nervous. What are you?
So, in my little world of healthcare, I think we are in a bit of a golden age of discovery. There's a lot of changes that are coming from genomics, biology, immunology, precision medicine. The ability to actually now cure disease is on the table, and so that makes it hugely exciting. And our ability to invest in businesses that help bring all of those drugs to patients over the journey is phenomenal. And in the Kingdom, for example, there is a great opportunity to build a regional leader in that space, and I think that that's something that we're all very interested and excited about. The nervous part is, I think somebody mentioned that if you sit still in private equity, you're going to be left behind.
Yes.
The market's going to continue to evolve. That's been true, to be honest, of every financial institution ever, banks, insurance companies, and I think the challenge is to continue to move in the right direction and not make the wrong moves.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's really a pleasure to have you all with us. Thank you for your expertise and your comments today, and I hope our audience appreciated the.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mei.
Maybe he'll be. That's your water. It's fine. He'll be kinder. He'll be kinder.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. My name is John Bringardner. I'm executive editor of DebtWire, and I'm excited to be here with a fantastic lineup of panelists to discuss the new retail markets for private capital. Now, as we'll get into, the wall between institutional and retail investing is crumbling as private capital funds are increasingly looking to the global market for the next frontier for growth. McKinsey projects global retail allocations to private markets could reach more than $12 trillion by 2030, as sweeping regulatory changes and digital investment platforms in Europe and Asia and elsewhere drive rapid expansion of access in 2025. But as we'll get into today, we're going to ask, is the average investor truly ready for the long-term lockups and complex risks of private markets? And how must fund managers adopt their strategies for this new class of client? Here with me today to parse through all this, we have Christophe Bavière, co-CEO of Eurazeo, Andrea Bonomi, chairman of Invest Industrial, Anuj Rajan at the end here, CEO, private equity at Brookfield Asset Management, and Yvan Vercoutier, managing partner and CIO at LGT Capital Investors. Now, Anuj, I'd like to start with you and get your thoughts on this shift from public to private markets. In 1996, there were 7,300 publicly listed companies. Today, there are only 4,300 in the US. So the need for access to private markets is clear. But where do we point out examples of steady, sustainable private capital portfolios?
Well, thank you, and it's a great stat, a great point, and I'll give you one more. Actually, 87% of companies in the U.S. with revenues greater than $100 million are private, and there clearly is a need for private capital. That need is emerging even larger. If you look at governments pulling back spending, the needs of CapEx more broadly, public markets not always being a great solution for a corporation's needs. There's a huge and tremendous need for private capital, and many of us have been doing it so far with largely institutional partners. But that's a real opportunity that's being missed for the larger, broader wealth market and community. And so for us, we think that this is a trend that is very sustainable, it's growing, and I think that we will see more and more of these flows over time into private markets as as the general wealth customer is getting much more educated and much more knowledgeable about the product.
Christophe, does that match with your experience as well?
Yes, no doubt. Maybe for us it represents now 20% of what we manage. So as we manage 45 billion, it now represents 9 billion euro. We have been doing it for, I would say, close to 3 decades. So we were among the pioneers of this trend, retailization in Europe. And we still perceive that a majority of the final investors, private individuals, are still largely under-allocated today to this new form of investment, to this new source of outperformance.
I'm not convinced about that. I'm not sure who is asking for access to private capital. Is it really the private equity players and private credit asking for retail, or the retail investor asking for those products? I mean, I can't recall, it was a lady from KKR recently said there are more private equity firms in the US than there are McDonald's. So it's not a capital issue. I think the private equity market is extremely well funded. I think depending on the year, it's $500 to $700 billion per year. So I'm not so sure there is that much need for capital. I think the answer is, if we look at the private equity market of the last 3 years, there is an issue, and the issue is one of liquidity. If we look at the last 30 years, private equity on average would return 20 to 25% distribution yields. And the last 3 years, we've been hovering around 10%. So anyone that has a mature private equity portfolio, that portfolio historically would turn over every 4 to 5 years. Today, we're on a 9-10 year cycle, which is creating a lot of issue in the institutional market to keep funding the private equity machine. So, a lot of the large alternative asset managers are publicly listed firms, and their stock price is predicated on continued 15% annual growth in AUM and fee-related earnings. So capital needs to come from somewhere, and an easy answer is to try to tap into the retail market. I'm a little worried. I'm less worried for private credit, because private credit, by definition, is much more liquid. So if you think about turnover of private credit portfolios, it's every 3 years. So if you have volatility in that market, I think these evergreen structures will be able to manage potential redemptions. I think it's a much bigger issue for private equity.
So you mentioned private credit, and I think we've heard a lot throughout the day, and really all this year I've heard about private credit investment in AI data centers. This is a way to deploy private credit on a mass scale, seemingly safe investment. There's got to be more niche opportunities to invest in these spaces. Andrea, where are you seeing opportunities below that mega giga size?
Well, if you look at the wealth channel, the evergreens, the deregulation is unstoppable. So I agree with actually both of them. Deregulation is necessary. The capital is going to flow into new products, and it may not be the desire of institutions, but it's going to happen. It is unstoppable, unfortunately. And then when you look at from the institutional point of view and the new products which are being produced, you mentioned credit. That is an access that private individuals did not have until the regulatory movement. So I think there's going to be niche products that are going to be very useful for private individuals to complete their investment portfolio.
And maybe what we need to say also is that there is not one market for private individuals. Yeah. There are different markets. The upper end of the market behaves like institutional investors, so there is no major adaptation for organizations like us to adapt to this market. Obviously, the deeper you go into the mass market, into the mass affluent, the more you need to adapt your product, and the more you need to adapt your investment strategy to this specific risk-return profile. And yes, if there is one lesson learned, the more you go deep into the market, the more you need to offer a fund that is largely diversified. In terms of credit, you need to be a generalist, you need to cover several sectors, you need to diversify on several risks. And in terms of private equity, probably the techniques that can be used through the secondary market, where you diversify faster and when the capital rotation is higher, are better adapted to these needs.
But for as long as I've been in private equity, that means over 30 years, the secret to performance has always been to try to be in the top quartile. I've always heard that if you actually index private equity or you try to really look at the overall market, you don't outperform really public markets. And so the big question is, will the industry be able to have an offering to the retail market that is able to provide a superior return to what can be achieved in public markets? And what I worry about is, as good as private equity has performed historically, the last 3 years they have underperformed public equity markets. And that's really the first time in the last 30 years that private equity has underperformed public markets. At a time where, and the same with the distribution yield, at a time when the economy is doing well, stock markets are historical high, credit markets are quite liquid. So those would be, I would say, my worries about the onslaught of offering of private equity products to the retail markets of today.
Mm-hmm. Is that, are you concerned more about that than we've started to hear about some of these, I call it, I think about my daughter, a vibe shift in the markets where, there's a sudden concern about credit quality. It's gotten a little shakier here in recent months. Is that any concern for you too in this space?
That's part of the cycle. I mean, you always have companies that go bankrupt. You always have companies that get in trouble. It's just that we haven't had some for a while, and all of a sudden you have two of significant size, and yeah, that tends to spook everyone, or maybe just remind investors that those are risky markets. And both private credit and private equity. It's all about underwriting risk. So what Andrea does in his private equity firm is underwriting risk and trying to arbitrage risk and return. The beauty of private equity historically is there's usually no, because it's an inefficient market, there is no correlation between risk and return. It's not by taking more risk you will achieve more return. Sometimes quite the opposite. In public markets, efficient markets, yes it is. More risk over the long term produce better return. So two very different markets, and this will require a lot of education for retail investors. The lockups, the volatility, the higher fee structure, the lack of liquidity. I mean, for a lot of investors, that's all new. One of the beauty of the closed-end fund, I mean, we saw it during the GFC, is the general partners keep their companies. They don't sell at the low point. They don't sell at a loss. Now, post-GFC, we had probably the most incredible period for financial assets, including private equity, and a lot of investments that were done pre-GFC that didn't get sold at the bottom ultimately did provide good returns. A retail investor will sell. He will sell at a loss. So there is a safeguard mechanism that, in a way, you take away in the evergreen fund structures. Investors will redeem.
Mm-hmm. And to bounce back on what Ivan was saying, the recipes that work, the discipline that institutional investors need to have in their asset allocation to private equity, to private debt, or into infrastructure, this search, this selection of the top quartile, of the best players, of the most experienced, the regular outperformer, this has to be applied also to when you deal with wealth management, when you deal with retailization, you need to keep exactly the same discipline. And if there is one advice we can give to private individuals when they are investing in wealth products, in retailization products, my personal recommendation would be to say you should select products from institutions that have a strong institutional backbone and where wealth management is a diversification. It is not, because replacing an institutional fundraising purely by a wealth or retail fundraising is not a good recipe for success.
One more critical component, alignment of interest.
Absolutely.
This is fundamental.
It's fundamental.
It's been fundamental from day one, and that's not going to change. And I'm just afraid that's getting lost a little bit at the moment.
I also think it's about, to your kind of point, was a bit of portfolio construction. No one's claiming that one should be take over another entirely. But today, institutions are anywhere from some 10%, some 40%, some more alternatives, and individuals are nearly zero. You know, maybe a sophisticated individual might be 4. Should individuals have maybe 5 or 10% of their portfolio in alternatives? And then an institution might pick 150, 200 sponsors to manage their money. Just like as individuals, we might only pick 1 bank or 2 banks to, you know, deposit our funds. Individuals, I don't think, will choose 150 GPs. I think they will pick a handful, and it'll be the ones that build trust, that deliver returns, and manage their liquidity well, that end up actually, you know, I think, kind of winning in that market.
Yeah. The 2 risks, you mentioned them at the beginning. You said there's a huge white space. Scale does not come with governance. Does not in private equity. The more you scale, the lower the returns. And Ivan mentioned it before. If you are a public company and you want scale, you have governance because you are of our size, but the returns will suffer. The second risk is, and you got a bad panel here, all of this is starting from the most established institutions. Therefore, governance is within the institution already. As you move into this wider market, you're going to have hillbillies come into the, no offense to the, you're going to have people come into this industry, and then the scary part is going to start. You know, I know Ivan is worried already about this situation. We're talking about the 0.1%.
We're at a very nascent stage. So.
Exactly, yeah. And it's only the top guys with sizable firms which are doing it. It's a very complex product, and as you move downstream, it's going to become a little bit, stick to the brands. If you want to invest at all, invest with the brands that have done it for a long period of time, or have the governance to be able to manage it. So the duty of care, it may not be completely aligned, like Ivan said, but it's at least, you know, from a governance point of view, a good governance.
It's moving fast. I mean, tens of billions of dollars are being raised for the evergreens. When you raise tens of billions of dollars and you're in an evergreen, you have to deploy that capital right away. Yeah. That's a very different model from the closed-end fund. When you raise money, you have 4 or 5 years to deploy it. Then you go back to your LPs, you show what you've done, you demonstrate. I like to say it's the private equity test. It's what made private equity work. You go back to the LPs and said, look, you know, here's how I deployed the fund. I followed the strategy. We as a team are stable. We had a couple exits, proof of concept. We have returns. Can I have more money for the next fund? And that model will not go away. But once you have the evergreen, you don't have that mechanism anymore. It's different.
Very important.
Well, and back to the point briefly on the risk there, what role do the regulators have to play here? We see regulation easing up in some areas, which is providing that impetus for retail money to come into alternative space here.
Well, that's a very interesting question, if I may, for a second. I mean, if you think about the private equity industry today, it's largely unregulated. It's between institutional investors and large private equity firms and smaller private equity firms. There is not that much regulation, although there's been more over time. As soon as you enter in the wealth management channels, retail money, I think you're going to see an onslaught of regulations. You know, what impact that may have on returns or how capital is deployed going forward, we'll have to see.
It is no doubt that it is a good thing that we are much more regulated when we launch products that are designed for mass market than when it's a pure institutional game and when we talk to very experienced. That's what we need also to, well, first of all, to say we are only dealing in the European market, and in Europe we don't lack of regulation. Maybe we lack of flexible and good regulation, but overall we don't lack of, we are probably a little bit over-regulated than anything else. And one thing that Ivan mentioned, which is very key, if you want to produce evergreen funds, you need to have a large scale of product offering. And for example, for a private equity fund, you need to mix all the different techniques that can be used in private equity. Not only primary buyout, but also secondary co-investment, continuation fund, because all the sources to deploy money, as Ivan was mentioning, you need to use all the tools, and the tools are increasingly diversified, and the deepness of the secondary market is a good momentum for that.
That's also, I mean, the secondary market, and maybe if I can say a word or two on it. Because of this evergreen raising large amounts of capital, particularly the 40 Act funds, they have to deploy that capital. So if they can buy something at 90 cents while the book value is 100, they will buy it all day long and then essentially create that 10% return immediately. The question is it really worth 90 cents? During the GFC, you know, a lot of investors forget is, you know, I could buy any large buyout funds, from whether it's Hellman Freeman or KKR or Blackstone Carlyle. I would get them for 50 cents on the dollar. Well, okay, we made good returns. But let's not forget, a lot of what's for sale in the secondary market at the moment are investments made over the vintage years 2019, 2022, late cycle investments. We have about $4 trillion of unrealized investments. This is the longest hold for private equity investments in history. You have $4 trillion that needs liquidity over the next 3 to 5 years. And the reason nothing has been sold is nobody is willing to buy at a price that gives general partners the return they're expected on those investments. So it's going to take some time.
Well, speaking of time, we're running out of it, but I want to make sure to ask before. We've spoken at a high level here, but I'd love to hear quickly, what are the opportunities you're seeing? Where are you buying into the private space for your retail wealth channels right now? Are there sectors that you're excited about? Are there spaces that you're looking at? We can go down the line. Anuj?
For us, it's actually no different than what our core institutional strategy is, which is what we're really excited about right now is industrials, where we continue to buy industrial companies and think that AI as a tool or technology as a tool to increase productivity around these businesses is a pretty immense opportunity. And hybrid capital solutions, which is an area that, you know, providing that bridge between debt and equity that we think is a pretty from a risk-reward perspective, is pretty attractive these days.
We do mainly industrial, so I will agree. I will agree here. But basically, it's a cycle. So everything you buy today, you pay very good prices, and if the cycle turns out like in the past, I admit that it's been a different, longer cycle this time, you have very good investments if you do them today. There are very few people who have momentum, who are deploying capital in a thoughtful way. It's a good moment to deploy capital. The capital you deployed in the past, some firms have deployed too much at the wrong prices, and there is a massive overhang. But that's a different situation.
My advice would be to say that we are using the secondary market a lot, and for example, in 12 months, we have been able to complete 14 different transactions, and they give you access to 94 underlying companies. So in 12 months, you can diversify your portfolio in almost 100 underlying companies. This, for us, is still a very interesting strategy for the retailization of the market. And on top of that, I will also add the fact that we didn't cover entirely the fact that the private debt market today is offering also a very good risk-return profile. Today in private debt, you can be in the high end of single-digit returns. And for private individuals with almost no default and with a very good capital rotation. And this kind of products for retailization are very well adapted.
Very quickly, we invest across the whole spectrum, primaries, secondaries, co-investments. For Evergreen, we do only secondaries and co-investments just because we're very conscious of managing liquidity. And we invest globally. That includes Asia, in particular China at the moment. There are a lot of things potentially for sale, but very few buyers. So if there is one area where things are cheap, that's one market. And if we're on top, we can put a 50% discount. We've been buying 80% of what we buy in the secondary market, or funds we're already in, or assets that we know.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I think there's going to be a lot more to talk about next year when we're back here. I appreciate the time. Please give them a hand. I'll see you back soon. Thank you. Oh, thanks. It was great.
Thank you, Ivan.